The people there, I ain't making sense. No, I ain't making any sense. The people arrive already.
Let us pray.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consolations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estate within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen. Amen.
Madam Clerk, please administer the oath to the new senator.
I, Silas Anthony Wilson, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to St. Lucia, that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and the laws of St. Lucia, and I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of St. Lucia. So help me God.
Thank you. Good morning, senators. And as it is the first time that we are meeting for the year 2023, let me take this opportunity to wish you and your family a very happy and blessed 2023. I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following motion and bill were passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to the Senate for its concurrence. Motion on the report of St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Review Committee. Agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank. I beg to announce that His Excellency the Governor General has been pleased to assent the following bill, the Virtual Asset Business Bill. I have received excuses from Senator Noorani Aziz and Senator Angelina Polius, who are unwell and so are unable to attend today's sitting. We wish them speedy recovery. I have also received an excuse from Senator Alison Jean, who is out of state dealing with the burial of her father and therefore will be unable to attend today's sitting. On behalf of the Senate, I would like to express condolences to Senator Jean on the passing of her father. Our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family at this time. I would also like to offer condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Joseph Baden-Allen, who passed away. Mr. Allen served as a Member of Parliament for Soufrière-Fonséjac from 1987 to 1992 and Speaker of the House of Assembly from April 2002 to January 2007. I want to bring to the attention of senators that the sessional committees of the Senate, Standing Orders Committee, House Committee, Committee of Privileges and Regulations Committee are required to meet to fulfill the functions set out in the standing orders. In keeping with the Standing Order 74-7 and to ensure effectiveness, initial meetings will be organized for each committee. Senators will be informed of the upcoming meetings. I wish to welcome Senator Silas Wilson, who joins us today, and wish you a very productive session with us today. Announcements. Statements from ministers. Statement from Parliamentary Secretary. Papers to be laid. Honorable Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Madam President, I wish to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 200 of 2022, District Courts, Electronic Litigation Filing and Service Procedures Rules. Statutory Instrument Number 201 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure to finance safety nets for vulnerable populations affected by COVID-19. Statutory Instrument Number 202 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure to support the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector post-COVID-19. Statutory Instrument Number 203 of 2022. St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, Larissos Vieux Number 4 Vesting Order. Statutory Instrument Number 204 of 2022. St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, Larissos Vieux Number 5 Vesting Order. Statutory Instrument Number 204A of 2022. Public Finance Management Act. Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Statutory Instrument Number 205 of 2022. Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Sunroad Property Inc. Order. Statutory Instrument Number 206 of 2022. Tourism Incentives, Divine Tropical Boutique Resorts and Spa Order. Statutory Instrument Number 207 of 2022. Tourism Incentives, Serenity of the Green Order. Statutory Instrument Number 208 of 2022. Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Cap Maison Management Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 209 of 2022. Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Divine Tropical Boutique and Spa Order. Statutory Instrument Number 210 of 2022. Fiscal Incentives 329 Heavy Industries Inc. Order. Statutory Instrument number 211 of 2022, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Golf Park 124 Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 212 of 2022, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Stonefield Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 213 of 2022, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Pura Vida Chateau Order. Statutory Instrument number 214 of 2022, Tourism Incentives, Quincy Griffith Order. Statutory Instrument number 215 of 2022, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Four Pillars Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 216 of 2022, Price Control Amendment number 22 Order. Statutory Instrument number 217 of 2022, Excise Tax Amendment number 1, Schedule 1 number 17 Order. Statutory Instrument number 218 of 2022, Fiscal Incentives, Eden Herbs Limited Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument number 219 of 2022, International Business Companies, Declaration of Head Office Company, Sandals Resort Management Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 220 of 2022, Price Control Amendment number 23 Order. Statutory Instrument number 221 of 2022, Price Control Amendment number 24 Order. Statutory Instrument number 222 of 2022, Citizenship by Investment Amendment number 2 Regulations. Statutory Instrument number 1 of 2023, Legal Profession Eligibility, Frank Edouard Walwin Order. Statutory Instrument number 2 of 2023, Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Agreement Amendment of Schedule Order. Statutory Instrument number 3 of 2023, Customs Service Charge Amendment of Schedule Order. Statutory Instrument number 4 of 2023, Data Protection Act Commencement Order. Statutory Instrument number 5 of 2023, Price Control Amendment number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument number 6 of 2023, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument number 7 of 2023, Tourism and Stimulus and Investment, Nehemiah Moore Order. Statutory Instrument number 8 of 2023, I think that should be, Companies Amendment Regulations, Report of the Chief Elections Officer on the general elections held on July 26, 2021, Final Report and Recommendations, the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project.
Motions. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you again, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to lay the following motion, standing in my name. Be it resolved that 1, the Parliament of St. Lucia acknowledges the receipt of the report of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Review Committee, hereinafter referred to as the Review Committee, and expresses its profound thanks and gratitude to the members of the Review Committee for their sterling contribution, diligence, and selfless dedication in completing the report. 2, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendations presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum's National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. 3, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to explore other sustainable opportunities for the St. Jude Hospital site. And 4, that the Parliament of St. Lucia, cognizant of the distressing conditions of the St. Jude Hospital at the George Odlum National Stadium, further expresses its profound gratitude to the doctors, nurses, staff, and patients for their contribution, dedication, patience, and commitment over the years. Madam President, before I proceed to provide some further explanation on the motion and to express some of the thoughts and ideas that emanate out of the discussions that we need to have and we have had on this motion, I just beg your leave to, since, as you correctly said, it's our first time meeting in the Senate, to extend best wishes for 2023 to all colleagues, yourself, and all St. Lucians, as we look forward to a much better year and achieving all our set goals for the 2023. I also join you, Madam President, in expressing condolences to our colleague, Senator Jean, and her family, as she mourns and goes through a difficult time, the passing of a family member, as well as a former member of this Parliament, Honorable Baden Alice's family, as they continue to grieve his passing. Madam President, I also want to extend a special welcome to a very competent and capable gentleman who now takes his seat to join this debate this morning, Senator Silas Wilson. We have fought many battles together, come from the East, where the wise men are, and I believe will add much value to this debate today. I look forward to his presentation, and I welcome him on behalf of this Senate. Madam President, I want to pose a question as I begin. And the question is, why are we here today? What took us to where we are now? Madam President, there's a very important reason why this Parliament met on Tuesday and this Senate meets today to deliberate and debate. Let's think back at what happened on July 26, 2021, where the people of St. Lucia gave a very strong mandate to the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party to take us out of a situation they perceived to be, or not to be fit for them to be governed. So they gave us a strong mandate, 15-2, and they have many expectations. And Madam President, one of the very important, or perhaps most important expectations of the people of this country, when they put us in government on the 26th of July of 2021, was that they expect the delivery of the St. Jude Hospital. And so, Madam President, we as a government believe that this, first of all, is more than a reasonable expectation. It's justified. And we are charged with that responsibility. And so, we have embarked on that very responsibility. And in doing so, we also believe that we owe the populace an explanation, an account, a proper account of what has transpired thus far with regard to the St. Jude Hospital. I think St. Lucians are interested and are very curious about what has led us here. And if, Madam President, there are any activities, actions, or decisions that warrant some kind of accountability, some kind of consequence, that it be done or it be adhered to. So, Madam President, just by way of a brief historical context, if we go back to about 13 years ago, more precisely on the 9th of September 2009, some refer to it as 999, dialing the number you dial when there's an emergency. It was clear that St. Lucia and the South suffered a serious blow. And I remember that because my son had just been born. And my son was born at the St. Jude Hospital just a few months after his birth. And we got the news that there was a fire, and the very ward that, the surgical ward just above where he was, where I had to go and see him for the first time, had been destroyed or damaged by this serious fire. And so every time there is talk of the hospitals, the fire at the hospital, my son always reminds me that, you know, it was close to the time where, when he was born. So I have a personal kind of nostalgic or historical connection with this situation. Just a minor, I think we'll manage this. So, Madam President, shortly after that fire, at the time, I must remind you that the United Workers' Party government was then in office, and the then Prime Minister's Honorable Stephenson King sought to put some efforts and measures in place to start the reconstruction of that wing and also to improve the infrastructure of the then St. Jude Hospital at its original site. Madam President, at that time, as we have heard from that very former Prime Minister, a total amount estimated in the region of $60 million was what was expected to have been spent to both reconstruct the surgical ward as well as put the improvements that were needed on the hospital. Just bear that figure in mind, Madam President, because it has some significance to what I may have to say later. And so efforts were made to mobilize the funding, and by 2010, just about a year later, a total of $41 million, mainly grant funding, had been mobilized, and that included donations by students. At that time, I was in the education system, and I remembered students and schools making donations. Ordinary children of the country pushing their hands in their pockets and making their small contribution because they understood the importance of the cause. It was a cause that brought the entire country together, and people were willing to give what they could because they recognized the need to address the problem. And so we saw those donations. We also received assistance from about 8 other countries, including Australia, Taiwan, Mexico, Israel, Germany, who also contributed towards the cause at the time. So, Madam President, it was very clear that not only our people, but other governments outside the region saw a need to contribute to the cause. So, Madam President, what happened after 2010? In 2011, there was a general election, and the Labour Party won the election. When we came into office, having recognized the need for the cause, having recognized that there wasn't much financing, there was no line of financing at the time, the Labour Party decided to continue working on the hospital. And so, work continued. And let us take note, Madam President, of something that is very important in that regard. The Labour Party government then decided to make sure that there was no interruption, there was no back and forth, engaged the very same contractor that the United Workers' Party had given the responsibility to do the work. And that contractor, as well as other subcontractors who were part of the project at the time, continued to work. So, Madam President, as I said, there was no line of financing when the Labour Party got into office. But we remember at that time the issue with the global financial crisis, We remember that at that time there were some serious challenges, and so the pace at which we would have liked things to happen, we got quite a lot done, and the hospital was then nearing completion. But again, there was another election. So by 2016, the government of the Labour Party was voted out, and the United Workers' Party assumed office. Madam President, what happened? All of the efforts that had been made from 2010 all of a sudden came to a halt. And why? The answer still remains. The answer is out there. Because what we know is that for almost 3 years, there was no work done on this hospital. And as a result, a total of about $98 million that had already been spent from the time the construction started in 2009 until 2016, all of that was stopped. Madam President, I wish to also point out that out of that amount, approximately 40% was spent on procuring materials. And these materials would include furniture, X-ray machines, generators, and other equipment very necessary for the hospital. And of course, the other 60% would have been spent on the construction efforts. Now, Madam President, if you calculate about 40% of 98 million, that would be in the range of $39 million worth of materials and equipment that had been procured. But what happened to that equipment? When the hospital construction was stopped, of course the equipment had to be stored somewhere. It stayed there. And of course, it would have been damaged or defects or what we could just, for want of a better word, spoilt. So we now have to deal with an investment of about $39 million worth of equipment and materials that today we may have to replace. Madam President, the reconstruction that should have started in 2016 instead was replaced by some witch hunt to find some kind of, was it audit, that we never saw. And all of that time, the hospital reconstruction efforts were halted. And so what do you have? Bush growing, mold, bats. I remembered going on the site and visiting the old site. I was then an opposition senator, although we were declined permission to visit, but being from the South, I don't think anybody could tell me I can't go. I can't go and visit a hospital or a building on government property. I am not, in any way vandalizing. So I had the opportunity to visit, albeit in a private capacity, and I saw all of the bat infestation and all of what had happened to millions of dollars worth of work that had been done. So it's not something someone told me. I saw it for myself. And so, Madam President, it was very unfortunate. There were animals that inhabited the place. Very unfortunate that that decision was made. And to date, the opposition was then in government, has refused to take responsibility for that decision. It is very clear by now that that decision may have cost them the elections, among others, but they have not taken responsibility for stopping the works. And so, Madam President, we have found out, and we've heard, there's been a lot of talk about it on social media, in the contemporary media, and even in this chamber, that instead of using and making use of what was available, what we saw was police officers going to people's homes and buildings, structurally sound buildings being broken down, millions of dollars lost because all of these things have value. And as a result, we have basically put the progress on the hospital in reverse. That's what happened during that time. But, Madam President, another thing that we need to remember is that by 2016, there had been a total of about $89 million worth of finance, a line of finance, available to continue the hospital. So not only did we already see expenditure, but there was already another line of financing, or a line of financing available. There were two loans of US $20 million, 120 and 110, and that would have amounted to about 89 million EC that had been secured, and that was available. So if the government had chosen to continue, that money was available. And after all of this, the government decided, no, we're going to stop. And so, Madam President, the years went by between 2016 and 2021, and it was not until about a few weeks or a few days before elections in 2021 that the government attempted, the then government attempted to borrow, by way of a loan, or to borrow $70 million. 70 million. And from the information that has been discussed, the interest or the conditions of that loan included an interest rate of 8% to be repaid in a one-year period. Now, Madam President, after people have had to suffer for so many years in a facility that should have been finished, why would you decide to make a decision just before that's when the House has been dissolved? There is no real government. The executive decides that they want to go and take $70 million. Is that, you have a guarantee that you'll be back in government? And why do you want that repayment period in 1 year at 8%? And that would be, and when you do the math, Madam President, that would be what? About $5.6 million of interest to be paid back in a year. So I have to ask the question, what is all of this telling us? Who was the focus during that time? Was it the hospital and the St. Lucians, not only in the south, because this hospital is important to every St. Lucian? Was it these people who were waiting, the doctors, the nurses, and everybody, who was really waiting to find a proper place to house our patients? Or was it about a whole lot of transactions and witch hunting? And, you know, I think what we have had before us gives us the answer to that. So, Madam President, to date, the Labour Party has gotten back into government, and we are still paying bills. So it's not only expenditure that was attempted. And by the way, Madam President, that $70 million, thank God, our public servants decided that ain't happening. They rescued us and they stopped it. And so we now don't have to have that additional $70 million to deal with. But we're still paying bills of about $600,000 for security services, even after all of that has happened. So, Madam President, I want to ask a question. We recall the advent of COVID in the beginning of 2020, and all St. Lucians can remember the pain and suffering that this pandemic caused us. We had to convert the Victoria Hospital into a respiratory hospital. And I just wonder, if we had completed St. Jude by then, whether the stress that was placed on the facilities, because we have OKEU, and all of the stress that was placed on facilities in the north of the island could not have been relieved if we had an alternative place. A St. Jude, a completed St. Jude, with all of that equipment and facility to have allowed the medical fraternity to operate. I am certain, Madam President, that if we had this hospital, the then government would have had the luxury or the comfort of having an additional facility to help during the time that we were faced with the COVID pandemic crisis. So, Madam President, we, upon entering government in 2021, decided, this Labour Party government, to put a review committee in place. We didn't just decide because there were options. We saw a new facility that has gotten the name of the box. We knew there was the original site, but there was so much happening that the government decided we're not going to go and commission another audit for how many million, I can't remember, but to put a review committee in place. And Madam President, that review committee was not put in place with any cost, free of charge, to decide what has happened, to find out what has happened, and to give the government some recommendations on the way forward. And so, Madam President, my presentation this morning would not only be about what happened, which is what I probably thought we should deal with first, but where is it now and what did the government of the Labour Party do? So having engaged a review committee, they went on the ground, and the review committee was not made of politicians or people who went to stand up in a door and stretch out their hands and try to determine whether it was wide enough because relative to their size, but people who were technical professionals who understood construction of hospitals, people who could have advised on options. And what we found was that these people came back and gave the government a report, a review, a complete review of what they found, as well as recommendations with options as to what the Labour Party government can now work with. So, Madam President, to date, this is where we are at. And some of the options basically were down to two. One, to continue work on the original site, or to engage in trying to finish the new, what is it they call it? Site 2, the box, right? And so, Madam President, the two options had to be considered. But when you consider option 2, I think it was pointed out and in the report that there are a number of reasons why the government is convinced that this option cannot be considered or should not be considered. From materials, as you see, if you put a camera on the outside, it looks like a beautiful building. You know, it's nice colored. And I remember during a tour of the site by this government when I was then a senator in the opposition. I remembered my colleague commenting on the material and, you know, very proud of what was there. But when you got in, it's like a tomb, Madam President. It's nice with marble and all of that, but inside, really, absolutely nothing. It's just an empty hall. And not only in one story, an entire place, you know, I had to jump across water and all of these things. So what you saw was a nice flash of what looks good, but really, on the inside, the roof and a whole lot of other things. I think the technical people are better qualified to give you a proper analysis of all the structural issues, Madam President. And so it got to the point where even the DCA, Madam President, the DCA who has to give approval, decided to isolate themselves from liability. And why? Because they know that there are certain conditions there that if they give grant approval may come back to bite them. And so if the DCA decides, look, I am not guaranteeing, you know, I'm indemnifying myself from liability on that particular project, why would the government want to go and get involved in this? And so, Madam President, we are guided by these professionals. And so we decide that we are not going to spend another $100 million to complete this monstrosity. We're not going to do that. However, we are not going to decide that we'll throw it away and allow, like was done in 2016, all of the materials and all of what is already on the ground to go to waste. And so that is why in the resolution, Madam President, resolution in number 3 in the resolution, it says that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to explore other sustainable opportunities for St. Jude Hospital site. Because we have given consideration to that structure. And at some point, we'll find a proper and appropriate way to use it. But Madam President, for now, the other option that was on the table was to complete the hospital on the original site. And so, instead of finishing the hospital or going into a situation that will never have been completed. And I think that's what the opposition would have liked to know, that we engaged in this, impossible task. 5 years go by, we can't do anything with it like they did, and St. Lucians have to hold us accountable. But we're not going to make that mistake. Madam President, there's something else that I noted was happening during the time that the United Workers' Party should have finished the hospital. And it just doesn't have it makes no logical sense, or there's no logic in it. Madam President, there we were, trying to bring in a $1.6 billion project. I don't know what, I think it was called the Pearl of the Caribbean, with horses and racetrack and a road and huge investment. Okay, I have no issue if a prime minister has his ambitions and he wants to bring a major investment into this country. But if you are planning to bring all of these into a certain area of the South, haven't you realized that a proper hospital in the very same area would have been a sensible thing to have in place? I mean, if you're going to have all these jets and tourists coming in and you visit, not that it will happen, but if you could visualize all of this dream and stuff going on in the South, couldn't you have also thought that, but wait, if we're going to have that volume of activity and people coming in, it just makes sense to have a good hospital. And so let me finish the hospital, and then, while I'm trying to go after my ambitious dreams, make sure that there is a proper health facility in the country or in that part of the country. But no, that was shelved, and we're going after all of those pie-in-the-sky investments. So, Madam President, no hospital, election comes, and we're in government. And so, we have decided that there has to be a way forward in this situation. And what the Labour Party government has decided is that we will and must complete this hospital for the people of St. Lucia. And so, we have one mission, and that mission is articulated in this resolution. And it is to complete the St. Jude Hospital and give the people of St. Lucia, the people of the South, what they much deserve. Now, Madam President, you realize this morning, I'm not here on any big drama, demonstration, and excitement, and no, that is not what I'm here to do. This is a very serious issue. And while some others may find it an opportunity for them to, charade and talk and bring up all kinds of issues that are not even connected with the hospital, my focus this morning is a very serious one. That this is a project that we need to make priority. And that is exactly what the St. Lucia Labour Party government has decided. So, in addition to ensuring that we are committed to completing this hospital, in the way forward, Madam President, the government has also decided that while we continue to work on this hospital, and work has commenced, by the way, while we continue to do so, we have to continue to pay attention to our other primary health facilities around this country. Because you cannot just ignore everything else that's going on and decide you're focusing on one project. The health sector in St. Lucia needs to always be a priority and be taken care of. And so we have continued to ensure that we will put in place all that is necessary to ensure that the other health facilities, the OKEU Hospital, the Grosile Polyclinic, the Soufrière Hospital, for example, and all the other facilities in this country, you would have heard announcements made, and there will be more, to ensure that they all continue to operate and to give support to our healthcare infrastructure while we complete St. Jude. So it's not just about one project. Madam President, you would have heard the Minister of Health, for example, mention the urban polyclinic on the VH side. And that is one of the examples of the support that we are putting in place to continue to improve our health infrastructure while we complete the St. Jude Hospital. So, Madam President, we understand the role of health, and alongside education is probably the most important thing that a country needs to pay attention to. And we understand that it is critical. The St. Jude Hospital is a critical asset to this country. And we have to, at every cost, we have to ensure that we complete it. Madam President, in that vein, I want to continue to thank the nurses, the doctors, the staff of the St. Jude Hospital. I have family members who work there, who have endured some of the distressing conditions. I must thank the Minister for Health, who has ensured that the challenges that are faced there have been addressed to a very large extent to make the workers more comfortable while we make the transition. There's a board that has now seen some revamping with a CEO, and all of the personnel that have been given the support at the St. Jude Hospital, where it is currently located. I want to thank them and the team at the Ministry of Health for what they're doing, so that by the time we complete the St. Jude Hospital, the morale of that particular staff would not have been so bad that they can look forward to an even better facility to work in. So we're taking care of them while they continue to be patient and work very hard at the site where they are. Madam President, I must tell you that this government has placed St. Jude as priority number one. As far as projects are concerned, it's priority number one, and I'd probably want to say 2, 3, and 4. Madam President, we will follow the advice of the review committee. We have cleaned up the site. All of the bat droppings and all that I described, I saw. If you go there now, this is no longer there. The site is starting to look like a place where people can actually come, feel safe, and can work. So we've done that. And the original plans that have been put together, a steering committee is in place and will be giving the advice, the technical advice, the expert advice to the team of professionals who will come together and ensure that we build and complete the St. Jude Hospital at the original site for the people of this country. And so, Madam President, I want to wrap up by saying, let us, for once, think about the reason why St. Lucians are saying they need the hospital. Let's think about that. Let us look at the 13 years that have gone by and the pain that has been suffered by our St. Lucians. Let us put aside all the egos, all the innuendos, and all of the back and forth. And I hope this debate has brought a lot to the table. I hope that opposition, government, independents, civil society, and all other stakeholders will find a common place to decide that this hospital construction project must be completed. I look forward to that happening, Madam President. I support the motion as it's presented here. And I'm hoping that very soon I can stand in this Senate and thank the Prime Minister and thank everyone else involved in saying that we have delivered this hospital to the people of this country who deserve it so much. I thank you, Madam President.
Be it resolved that the Parliament of St. Lucia acknowledges receipt of the report of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Review Committee, hereinafter referred to as the Review Committee, and expresses its profound thanks and gratitude to the members of the Review Committee for their sterling contribution, diligence, and selfless dedication in completing the report. 2, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendations presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. 3, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to explore other sustainable health opportunities for the St. Jude Hospital site. And 4, that the Parliament of St. Lucia, cognizant of the distressing conditions of St. Jude Hospital at the George Odlum National Stadium, further expresses its profound gratitude to the doctors, nurses, staff, and patients for their contribution, dedication, patience, and commitment over the years. Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me take this opportunity to wish all senators a happy new year. And indeed, all my friends all across St. Lucia, those of you whom I haven't seen since the new year has dawned. Madam President, frankly, the people of St. Lucia have become very fed up, frustrated, very indifferent, and very sinister about this St. Jude's reconstruction project. It's a project, Madam President, of colossal project management failures that continues to eat away at our ability to deliver quality health care to the people of St. Lucia. Madam President, I agree with the leader of government business when he said that this cannot be political where we are. That the decisions, that the positions that we take ought to rise above the normal partisan political fray. I agree, totally. But I also disagree with quite a bit that he has said. I also disagree with a few aspects of this motion which the government has laid before this honorable House today. The records will show, being before us here, there are 3 different reports. There's a technical audit. There is the Shanta King, there's the handover report rather. There is the final report which was commissioned most recently by this administration. But the records will show that when the disaster happened back in 2009, that the project cost was $60 million. And the attempt then by the then UWP administration was to build the surgical ward, to rebuild it. And the cost of this was going to be $60 million. But in the handover report, interestingly, it was said that the United Workers' Party administration of that day, led by Stephenson King, was going to take the decision to build a more modern facility in the area of the George Odlum Stadium within that vicinity. It has to be noted, Madam President, that it was felt that continuing the project in an already aged building, in fact, if you look at all the reports, you would see that at the time that the fire came, St. Jude had already been distressed. And the fire exacerbated that situation and compounded an already bad problem that existed of an aging building, because these were constructed in many decades ago. And so a lot has changed in the whole standards of hospital and delivering of health care to people all over the world. So the world has changed from 60, 70 years ago, when the St. Jude Hospital would have been constructed. So from 60 million, but then there is a letter I have in my possession from former Permanent Secretary, I think then she was in the Ministry of Finance, Tracy Polius. And in that letter, Tracy Polius said that the total cost of the project, and this letter is dated March 30th, 2016, and it was going from the Permanent Secretary in the, to the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. That person would have been the now member for Freeport South, Dr. Kenny Anthony. And she said in this letter that the project, the total cost, because now obviously the scope of works has changed, the plans have changed, and the project have now been expanded to what we know as phase 1. That project now, based on this letter, would have cost 178 million Eastern Caribbean dollars. Tracy Polius. I can make it a document of the House if colleagues want to make themselves familiar with it. I don't have a problem laying it in this House. Elections happen in June of 2016. But before that, Madam President, you would know very well that many dates have been promised by technocrats who advise politicians of that day. Many failed opening dates were announced in the media, where it was frustrating for the then Minister of Health and the then Prime Minister and the government of the day. Of course, a lot of promises were made. The project was simply fraught with a whole host of construction issues. Now, I don't want you to take my word for it. John Peters, who is a member on this review committee, this is what he had to say in 2017 about the phase 1. He said, "What has happened at St. Jude's is a disgrace. It is the worst that I have ever seen in my 34 years of engineering in terms of contract administration." John Peters. I go further, and I'll make this transcript as a submission to the House. "It is a mess of Herculean, as it says, proportions." The engineer, who is also a committee member on the final report which we're debating today, went on to say, it was sad as a professional engineer reading such a document and to see how state funds have been so wasted. Wasted. Professional opinion. This is what the government of the day, of which I was part of, was facing with. A project that was fraught with issues, that had a lot of wastage. And so when the leader of government business said that we left containers of equipment and materials to be spoiled, this was already happening. One of the problems that St. Jude's faced, and which is why the project was delayed significantly, is because of the financing issues. If you consult the handover report, of which the review committee has referenced, they have said that the project stopped and started because the finances weren't coming at a very consistent basis. I'll get to that, more of that in a moment, but I want to continue with John Peters. It was really difficult to read the document and to see the level of maladministration, as it were, in terms of how you should run a project and run a contract. I read more of John Peters. So that was a bit sad, one must say, and it really goes to the issue of accountability. He goes on to say, I would want to say, too, that we have to hold public servants accountable. We have to hold ministers of government responsible. The Constitution is clear in terms of the responsibility of a minister directing and controlling his ministry or her ministry, the role of a permanent secretary in terms of his or her responsibility to supervise that ministry. John Peters. So, how could a government come in and under those circumstances decide that they're going to continue in the mess? Decide that after $98 million was spent, that the whole idea of building in a piecemeal, getting DCA approval, phase by phase, phase by phase, phase by phase, right? Walls were being built and knocked down. The roof of the facility was built 3 times based on the technical report that exists here. There were several off-site locations for materials. Your own report suggested, the report that we're using now, it cannot be certain whether the oxygen tanks that were ordered, whether they ever made it to St. Lucia. You want us to continue our project under those circumstances? How could we? Up to now, you don't even know what the cost of the project is. But you've gone ahead and made the decision, right, that you're going to go back to the old building. But you don't know how much it is to finish the building. You don't know what timeline it is to finish your building. And you want us to agree that this is the way to go. So I say to you, Madam President, that while I support the whole notion or the whole principle of getting people out of the stadium at the quickest possible time, because 14 years, it's almost 14 years now, it's really a long time that people should be there nursing wounds and going for health care and reparative care under such circumstances. Madam President, the report that we are going through here today has cleared up a misrepresentation of facts that I have seen spewed around by the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, this current administration. And I want to turn your attention, Madam President, to 7.6 of the report. Let's go there for a minute. And in 7.6 of that report, they speaks about phase 2 of St. Jude's. It says, according to the status report dated 29 of July 2021 and prepared by the NAO, the cumulative expenditure of St. Jude's Reconstruction Project Phase 2 from the commencement in February 2019 to July 21 amounts to $118 million. The status report also advises that an amount of $89 million has been paid to date. An amount of $28 million is still owed to the contractor. This administration continues to bandy around a contract or a payment recommendation by the then Minister of Finance to pay $70 million of works owed and works that had to be finished. What the report is clearly telling you is that what the former Minister of Finance is saying is true. we owed, this is your own committee that you've put in, and they're telling you now that we owed the contractor almost $30 million. And so it is inaccurate and erroneous for you to keep quoting that we gave a direct award for $70 million that was sitting on a desk that people refused to sign. The contractor had already done this work. And so, therefore, we were at great pains to explain to you, this is exactly what it says. So we were at great pains to explain to you that there were people who were owed monies. Now that you're in government, you are making it right to pay them. But when we say, listen, the $70 million which you found on your desk, one aspect of the money goes to paying outstanding works, and the other aspect is to finish the ground floor of the building to operationalize St. Jude's Hospital. Now, and so that's what it is, and that's what we've been saying. But it takes your committee to come and tell you the very same thing that we've been telling you since you came into government. But because of politics, because it is convenient, because you want to fool people, you want 70 million to sound like, oh, a lot of money. 70 million found in my desk. But we owed the contractor. And so if we care about finishing the project, then we wouldn't be having such foolish conversations about it requires a lot of money. You've already spent 98 million. And so coming to government and realizing that the St. Jude's project was fraught with technical issues. It was fraught with financing issues. It was fraught with accountability issues. It was fraught with consistency issues. All these dates. There were so many dates that we were told that the hospital was going to finish. The experts have said that this goes down in history as one of the worst pieces of project management that they have seen. You take over the government and you're saying that you're not going to stop, take a breather, based on the quantum of money that must go into this. You will continue in the mess? Only a fool breaks his own heart. And so if we continue doing the same thing, the same way, it equates to madness. And that's what was happening in phase one. Absolute madness. And so we had to take stock of where we're going. We had to get expert advice. And so that's why the company, reputable company of FDL, was asked to come and to do a technical audit and to give us expert advice on what was going on and to also tell us how to cure the problem that had so far expended $98 million at the time when we assumed office. So you can't come now and pretend that you left a perfect project. Far from the truth. When we were in government, you know what they used to say? The opposition parliamentarians of the St. Lucia Labour Party used to say that the hospital is so close to being completed that all you need to do is to throw chemical and open the building. Yes. You remember hearing that?
Yes.
Now it has cost them $10 million just to put chemical and clean up the place. Just to throw chemical on the building, it's $10 million. Now, just imagine if the chemical, just to sterilize and clean up the building, is going to cost you 10 million, right? Then how much is it going to cost you to do the rest? You haven't laid a brick and you've already spent $5 million.
10 million.
And so, this is madness. Another thing that this report clears up, another misnomer, is what aspect of phase 2, what proportion of the project is completed. And we go to 7.2 of the report, and we see that the SLP's own review committee says that it is 70 to 90% completed. 70 to 90%, I think I have the wrong, 7.4. Sorry, Madam President. 7.4 of the report shows the status of completion. 70 to 90% completed. But yet you're going to go back into a mess. Because why? You have to be right. Rather than serving the people, you have to be right.
I stand on a point of order, Madam President.
You have to be right.
Madam point of order, Senator.
Thank you. The member opposite is misleading the House. Whilst he reads from section 7.4, he does not read the complete sentence. Whereas it reads as he indicated that it is 70 to 90% complete. The sentence continues by saying the project as a whole remains less than 30% complete. And I think the member is deliberately not including the sentence so as to mislead the House and the people of St. Lucia.
Senator Fede, it is in the report which indicates, would you like to clarify why you focused on the 70 to 90% complete, or you want to add that second part of the sentence?
So, Madam President, you see, when we're too hyper, this is what happens, right? And so if the member had allowed me to continue, I would also go on to tell her that it stated that the project will take 18 months to complete.
No, we're talking about the percentage now, not the months. The project as a whole remains less than 30% complete. Would you add that part?
Yes, but we're talking about the ground floor to move in, because we're talking about moving the people into the
Senator Fede,
out of the
Senator
stadium.
Fede, stay with us, stay with us. We are not talking about the months, we are not talking about anything else but that particular sentence, part 2, phase 2, however, the review committee. So we want you to read the sentence in its entirety so that you could be accurate in what is reflected here. Could you do that, please?
No, but absolutely, it's written there for all to see. If
Senator Fede,
yes,
for the record, because this is being recorded, it has to be in Hansard, it has to be in our journals. So we want to make sure you have the accurate information here from the report. So kindly do this. Thank you.
So according to the review committee, it says that the whole project remains less than 30% completed. But what I am talking about, what I am finishing the ground floor, the objective is to move the people at the fastest possible time. And so while the opposition, for its own benefit, would like to look at the entire building, it was never the UWP's intention to occupy. You are my political opponents. You are my political opponents, and so to me you are opposition to me. So while the United Workers' Party administration was very, very clear that there are two phases to this, is to move into the ground floor, get people out of the stadium at the quickest possible time. And we are 90%, 70 to 90% there, according to your own review committee. And that's the point I'm establishing. Okay, and so yes, if you want to look at the entire building, it's based on your committee, it's 30%. 30% completed. Okay? I have no problems with that. But why are we here? In your own recommendations and some of your own public utterances, what you have said is that, and your Prime Minister is on record of saying that he will move into one wing of the hospital and not necessarily complete the entire project. What is different from what we're saying here now? What is different? There's no difference. Because your approach, the public indication, and words that have been uttered by your own Prime Minister suggest that we're going to focus on this wing, move into that, and then get people in on a phase-by-phase basis. So what is the difference? If it's good for you, why isn't the same logic possible with us? But we are 90% there, 70 to 90% there, according to your own report. And so we're moving on because the report continues to make other revelations. So 8.2 and 7.6 of the report would suggest that about 166 million will be the total to get the ground floor, the raw construction, to be completed in the ground floor. The difference is if you ask the government side, how much does it cost for phase 1, they couldn't tell you. But yet they're asking me to go blindly like a madman and follow them down this path of blindness. They cannot tell me how much their project costs and how much will it cost to finish your project. After 18 months, you don't have a cost. You don't have DCA approval. You don't have anything. You couldn't tell me how long because your prime minister said, when he, at his conclusion, and you go back and watch his tape, said that he's not going to commit himself to dates, but he will try to finish the hospital at the earliest possible time. What does that tell you? You don't have a clue as to where you're going with this project, but you want me to follow you? You don't have DCA approval. You don't have the costing. How much does it cost? You don't know. How long will it take? You don't know. Your report, though, says that it takes 18 months to complete the ground floor. 18 months is what your report says. 18 months to complete phase 2. Your report says that, and I'll show you the specific part of the report in just a moment, if you bear with me. Right? And so, how can I follow you? How can I possibly agree with you to say that I am going to put my vote to say that, and the records will show that Dominic Fede voted in this psychosis of madness, no cost, no DCA approval, no time. Where are we heading? This is, if you were leading a ship, you're leading that ship to a wreck. That ship is going to sink. And that is how you have managed every aspect of this country since you have come in the last 18 months. Put you to manage the inflation situation so that the people of St. Lucia can get some relief from the price, disaster. Put you to manage the crime situation, absolute disaster. Put you to take care of our roads. It's the worst record of any government ever in the history of this country. Our road network are in a deplorable state. And it's a reflection of your management of all aspects of government. That's right. And so I'm sorry. I'm a little more serious than that. I don't follow people blindly. Given your record, I would be a madman to follow you blindly. And I want to use layman language so that everyone understands where I'm going. This is absolute craziness. You have made a decision. And you don't know how much money you're talking about. This is going to be in the millions of dollars that we need to spend. But yet you cannot tell us how much. And you know, the implication with the global supply chain and inflation. And if you go and you look at the cost of building materials, I mean, in some aspects, I did some research before coming here. And they tell you that some of the lumbers like plywood is 100% in terms of the increase in cost. And then the average in hardware or building materials is about 40%. And that is a massive cost. So when you look at what you needed back in 2016, that number doesn't apply anymore. So where are we going? You notice the government side is quiet because they themselves don't know. The blind is leading the blind. How can I follow the blind? Madam President, I cannot. And so I'm sorry. I simply, Madam President, cannot follow people who don't know where they're going. And that is the most salient point. We cannot, we must not, and we will not, because this is madness. Simple, one word to describe what's happening. But just to say that you were right. And you know, I was feeling very good, you know, when I heard the leader of government business said that he thought that the St. Jude's thing ought not to be political. But there's no proper sound decision being made here, no decision backed with empirical evidence, no facts. The basics here, you just haven't got this done right. You've got this really, really wrong again. Now, I'll tell you, and I'll quote John Peters.
Senator Fede,
Yes.
you have 15 minutes left.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President. And what he said on DBS, interviewed by Timothy Polio, is that it will take close to 3 years to finish the other, the phase one, the original aspect of the hospital. But you know, what they must also answer today is, what do we get after we would have spent? Well, we still don't know. That's an X. You know, Malcolm X used to call himself X because he didn't know his last name. So when it comes to how much is the SLP administration is going to spend on the building, we have to put X because we don't know. Then we also have to do like Malcolm X and say that how long is it going to take them? Well, we have to put an X there as well because they don't know. And then when we're done, what is it going to look like? What's going to be the functionality? Is it going to be up to world-class standards? Is it going to meet all the modern standards of a hospital? We have to also put an X by that because they don't know. So if you don't know, how do you expect us to know what you're doing? So, I mean, this is an atrocity. This is ludicrous. Madam President, I'm sorry I have to be as frank as that. But look at that. Your own committee was clearer and was better guided on where phase two was going. They can tell you 18 months. They can tell you 166 million would be spent. They looked at the costs submitted by the Economic Development Ministry, and they said it was $48 million. It's there. Spent 118, $48 million. No, I can tell you that. I was not even the Minister of Health, nor the Minister of Infrastructure. But at least I can tell you with confidence as to what we were doing and where we were going. And that's the difference. We had direction in the United Workers' Party, and you are directionless, and you are taking the ship, you're taking us to a shipwreck. Anyways, very, very sad to see. Now, let's go to monies that they have spent. Let's try to make some sense of their numbers. So, in the handover report, it says that $98 million was spent by the St. Lucia Labour Party administration's effort. The letter from Tracy Polios indicated that the project is a total of 178 million. If I subtract 98 million, I'll be left with an outstanding amount of 80 million. And if I add maybe a 40% inflation rate on that, it's probably an additional 112 million that they might probably need. I'm no engineer. I'm just trying to make sense of what they don't know. So if we add the 112 to the 98 that's already spent, a grand total of 210 million would have been spent on raw construction on phase one of the project. This is a project that originally was supposed to be $60 million. And now it has escalated out of control to somewhere in the ballpark of over $200 million to complete the project in terms of the total that have been spent. But you can't even stand on a point of order because you don't even know your own number. But I am just here making some guesstimates based on the figures that we have had. And so, Madam President, believe you me when I tell you that this approach does not help the people of St. Lucia to gain any confidence in what is taking place as to the approach with St. Jude's. They touched on that. Let's go to 9.3. 9.3 of this report makes for very interesting reading. 9.3. And talks about phase 1. It says the review committee has not ascertained whether the oxygen generating plant which was purchased under the St. Jude's reconstruction project of phase 1 was ever shipped and delivered to the island. I mean, could you imagine this? Could you imagine? Could you imagine? Could you imagine? Could you imagine what's going on here, Madam President? Right? And so, according to item number 40 on page 107, the Hull Crew handover status report dated July, the supply and assembly of the oxygen was listed and completed, right? So it says in their report that it was listed and completed, but yet they can't determine if it was ever shipped on island. What is going on? What is going on? But you never ship it to the island. It is your incompetence that your own committee, 7 years later, cannot tell you whether it ever made it to St. Lucia. I mean, and you want me to follow you? I mean, and so therefore, the submission, Madam President, by the leader of government business, that we left materials to waste. The leader of government business, I will advise him to take a very detailed read of this report and come back for another debate. Because really and truly, if he went through this report with greater detail, he would see that there are a lot of irregularities that have raised a lot of concerns. And then I believe that he would have had a better appreciation as to why the UWP administration led by Alan Shastney had to abandon this approach, because this project was fraught with a number of problems. They had, if you read the FDR report, and please familiarize yourselves with it, contracts were risen by over 200% in some instances. Whilst when you look at the workload, there wasn't a commensurate workload that showed a 200% increase in works. So all kinds of issues that have arisen from your effort, but you want us to follow you. We have better sense than that on this side. We cannot follow you. We cannot follow a blind vision. We cannot follow a government that doesn't know where it's going. And so the leader of government business erroneously said that $1 million, $100 million, he will not agree to a decision to spend. Where is that written? Where is that? Where in the report does it say that you need another $100 million? Where? I jumped high, I looked low. I can't find any documents that suggest that we need another $100 million to finish phase 2. If you can provide us with that information, then I'll have to say I agree with you. But I haven't seen it. I'm no engineer, I'm no contractor, I'm a tourism person. Okay? But please help me. Help me, please, Madam President, so that the leader of government business can provide the evidence that it will cost $100 million. Now, what I find ironic is that the government don't even know how much it costs for their own project, but they know how much it costs for phase 2. That is what I find ironic. That is what, you're within the center of this administration. You don't know how much it costs, but you know how much phase 2 will cost. That is very, very, very ironic. He mentioned that DCA removed itself from the liability. That's not true. That's not what has happened. The DCA has certain regulations, and so there are certain conditions that you must meet if the DCA, like the ones that were listed out yesterday Tuesday, if you were following the lower house, and it shows all the things that were not done at that stage. It's not that the DCA was absolving itself because something was wrong. The DCA trusted the contractor. The DCA trusted the capacity of the contractor that he is able to get the design and the architectural components well. And so therefore, a conditional approval was therefore warranted under the given situation. And if you look at how you have been building St. Jude's, right? You've been building walls and knocking them down, putting up the roof, and then having to redo it. The former Prime Minister said on Tuesday that the contractor selected was giving substandard work on phase 1. So he had to fire the contractor. In his own words, it's in the Hansard, Madam President. Yes, ma'am?
You have 5 minutes to complete your presentation.
Thank you. And in his words, he's saying what was happening even in his time was such a mess that he had to fire the contractor and replace him, right? And if you listen to him well, he said that he continued the sort of approach by the Stephenson King administration, which was building the building without the necessary approval. So it meant that most of phase 2 was done, and in the technical audit report, was done with any complete architectural or detailed drawings. How are you going to spend $98 million, a project of such magnitude, and you don't even have DCA approval? That's what you were doing. You had none. You had not even submitted the complete drawings to DCA. And that's where you were going. And so therefore, it doesn't make me feel good to say any of this, but I have to make sure that this conversation, that the narrative that accompanies this motion is balanced. And that while we are obligated to make a decision in the best interest of the patients, the doctors, the nurses, that we must also get this right this time. I want you to do well. I want you to deliver St. Jude's. But you must do it right. You must do it well. Because the consequences financially and the implications for our health sector are too dire for you to get this wrong again. Another government should not fail on this project. So I want you to be successful. But the way that you are going doesn't give me any confidence that you can ever succeed in this, because you don't know the cost. You don't know you don't know the cost. You don't know how long it's going to take, right? And you have no DCA drawings approved after 18 months, and you couldn't tell me what is going to happen. And so therefore, it saddens me that this colossal failure of a project under your stewardship continues. Madam President, I thank you very much for your indulgence.
Senator Shawahir.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Senators. I want to wish each and every one of you a Happy New Year. It's like the month of January is almost completed, and we have not had a conversation in this honorable House. Madam President, I just beg leave of you just for 2 minutes to express my condolences to my extended family, the family of Mr. Cyril, who was laid to rest yesterday, former, World War II veteran. Want to just let his family know that we are truly appreciative of his services to our country. And also to the family of Sister Serafina, who was a very vocal supporter of the St. Lucia Labour Party who resided in the community of Twapito in Castries Southeast, but originally from Choiseul. She was taken away from us a few weeks ago, and it was such a tragic situation, such a tragic incident that has left the community in a very cloudy, gray, and sorrowful manner. I want to express my condolences to her family and also to Senator Dr. Alison Jha, who is not with us today, but is burying her father. We want her to know that she is in our thoughts. And on my way to the Senate this morning, Madam President, I learned that a man who I visited in Forestier last week, Ninja, a bus driver on the Lacqua Bardney Odsa route, had a horrible accident in Forestier this morning. And I saw that the fire service was on the scene. I'm wishing him a speedy recovery. Madam President, I noted that the leader of opposition business was taunting members on this side of the House, to stand on points of orders, to refute what he is saying. But sometimes, Madam President, you have to wait and strategically respond. And I think we cannot call people liars in this House, right? But untruths or false information, because the people of St. Lucia truly need to understand why it is that the St. Lucia Labour Party is going in the direction that it is going. So very briefly, we would recall that in 2009, and I was very privileged to have listened to the explanations in the House on Tuesday by former Prime Minister, Senior Minister, who is now the Member of Parliament for Castries North, and also former Prime Minister, the Member of Parliament for Beaufort South, giving St. Lucians a full account of what transpired during the time of their leadership. And particularly moved by the presentation by the now sitting MP for Mico North, Honorable Norbert, who said that if he knew today, 13 years later, that he would be standing in the House of Parliament to debate the reconstruction of the St. Jude project, if he had only known that, he would have bet differently, because he did give a little joke about, he would have bet his life on it, Madam President, because he never thought that it would have taken 13 years for the people of the South to get the St. Jude Hospital. But in 2009, that tragic day in September 9, 2009, under the leadership of Honorable Stephenson King, he expressed that it was his desire to see something bigger for the South. Unfortunately, or fortunately for the Labour Party, who came into office in 2011, Honorable Stephenson King lost the election. Dr. Kenny Anthony came into office. Now that, as we recall, was a very challenging period for the SLP administration. We experienced the effects of Hurricane Thomas. We had the Christmas trough. We were slowly trying to recover from that financial crisis that hit the world from 2008. And so Dr. Anthony had his own challenges as well. But what Dr. Anthony did not do, and I want the people of St. Lucia to understand, because it was said in the lower house on Tuesday, but most people don't get that. He did not stop the project. He did not fire the contractor. The civil servants who were working on this project were not sent home. And that has always been the modus operandi of a St. Lucia Labour Party administration. Because the moment you can prove that you are doing your work, you have nothing to be worried about. And as we can see under the leadership of Honorable Philip J. Pierre, people are not being sent home. If your contract has expired, that is a different thing. But people are not being fired. So Dr. Kenny Anthony continued the project. Then he lost the election. But Madam President, we've made a lot of discoveries of reports that went missing for 6 years. Members opposite had no idea of. but can make full reference to it today, 6 to 7 years later. But I'll get there. So the United Workers' Party came into office in 2016, and the then Minister for Economic Affairs and de facto Minister for Health, Social Transformation, Minister for all constituencies, Ministers for Tutbagay, commissioned an audit. Now I want people to understand, there's nothing wrong for a government to come in and request a review of a project. It is only the natural thing to do because you want to ensure that there is accountability and you know your direction on the way forward. So he commissioned that report end of 2016 going into 2017. The people of St. Lucia paid about $1 million for that report. We are not against consultants getting paid for their work. They have the expertise and they have the experience. But it is expected that there is accountability for the money that is spent from our taxpayers. $1 million, Madam President, spent on a report that produced 300-something pages, 500-something pages, quite in depth on the perspective of the person doing the audit. But Madam President, after we paid all of that money, because apparently people think $1 million is nothing, after we paid all of that money, we never saw the details of that report. That report, until Tuesday, was finally made a document of the House when it was referred to in the House. And there was another report that I referred to earlier, what the member opposite has spoken of as the Shanta King report, because 6 years later, they now know who Ms. Shanta King is. He spoke about the findings of the report, but would not go in depth as to what was said in that report. Because that report, now made a document of the House, has spoken of fixtures, furnitures, AC, containers, all the things that were left behind by an SLP administration for the United Workers' Party to continue the project. But the member opposite is talking about oxygen. He quoted from page 23, referred to oxygen generating plant, that the review committee could not ascertain whether the oxygen generating plant was purchased under the phase 1 project. Because in the past 5-6 years, it was not their responsibility to find out where the oxygen generating plant was. Because if they truly cared about that, Madam President, you think we would have had such a disaster of COVID that we did? Because the number one thing, the most important thing that the people of St. Lucia required at the time was oxygen. But I'll come back there. So, Madam President, the missing tiles, the missing paint, the missing everything, and you want to talk about how can I follow you blindly if you cannot tell me where the oxygen plant is? But it seems like the people of St. Lucia were not blind, but we were drowning because we still can't even see the 23 islands that they promised. Anyways, Madam President, United Workers' Party came into office 2016, commissioned that report. We have not seen it. Until now, the Shanta King report has revealed several things. Madam President, I want to draw your attention to page 13 of the report, an area of the report that has been quoted. And the leader of the opposition on Tuesday started to read the entire thing, but I would not do St. Lucians that. I will just read a short two-liner that has been underlined in bold. And I will read the full sentence. Madam President, the issues highlighted are significant in nature. And this is the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Technical Audit Interim Report of January 2017. However, we do see a great value present in the works completed to date and believe the project is salvageable and could be converted into a facility that can properly serve the needs of St. Lucia. Madam President, I listened to the House sitting, and one thing I want to really point out that really shook me for a moment was when their leader stood up and said that it was not really about moving the people out of the stadium. Madam President, my grandmother, Veve Bakan, from Cantonment Oje, lives directly opposite that St. Jude Hospital facility. She has suffered 2 strokes in about 3 years. And that is the place that she has gone to get her medical care. And every time I come visit her, Yishmwe, ki jou, what kai fini l'hôpital la? When will the hospital be completed? Because if you do not feel it, you will not know it. Does the opposition understand that the nurses and the doctors who are currently housed in the St. Jude facility, in the George Odlum Stadium, do they understand that these people are unable to provide adequate care because they do not have the adequate resources? Does the opposition understand that for 13 years, the sportsmen and women of St. Lucia sacrificed development? And now we have a scourge of crime. You know, when you engage in sports and extracurricular activities, you can relieve some stress. We know what sports does to people, that sort of discipline that it instills in you. But it's not about that, because it's all about the gray and yellow building. And Madam President, if you go a little close to that building, you will see there's some sparkly thing on the wall. The yellow part of it, like there's some glitter. Like we forget, all that glitters is not gold. You want to refer to the John Peters section of the report. John Peters was referring to the report that was given to him. But until he had to walk in there and experience it for himself, was he able to be part of this review committee and tell you that what exists now is not adequate for the people of St. Lucia to move into? Madam President, the member opposite, I heard him and I wanted to stand on a point of order, but I figured it would be best to express to the people of St. Lucia exactly what happened. 7 days before the election, and I have with me a document from the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation, 15th July 2021, and the subject is revised draft finance agreement for St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. I can make this a document of the House. It speaks of the receipt of the draft finance agreement for the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project from Fresh Start Construction Company. A while ago, the member stood in the House and said that we had to pay this company $70 million for works that they have already done. Madam President, we have the contract in our possession between the government of St. Lucia and the Fresh Start Company, Construction Company
Madam
Limited.
President, I rise on a point of order.
Is your point of
I'm
order,
very
Senator?
sorry to...
Senator Fede, I'm still questioning.
Yeah.
What is your point of order?
Misrepresenting and misleading the House. Madam President, just to clarify what I've said again. The Labour Party administration has said continuously that Fresh Start, there was a contract on the desk which wasn't signed by a civil servant to pay Fresh Start $70 million. I said that the report has shown, based on the monies we've spent, 118 million, and 28 or 29 million is owed to the contractor. We kept saying that the 70 million is not all monies that are going to works in the future, but part of it is works that the contractor has already done. That's what I've been saying.
Madam
So I've never
President.
said to you that what she said is not what I said. So I hope the senator is clearer.
You said you're hoping what she said is not what you said.
No.
What did she
I'm-
say that you are having
No,
an
she's
issue
saying
with?
that I am misleading the House by saying that there was never a 70 million contract to Fresh Start.
Madam President, that's not what I said.
I can't
Yeah.
recall the senator saying that. I know she's about to read from a document. And
No, she did read
indicated-
from a document,
She's about to
which
read
is
from a
the same
document.
70 million which I was speaking of. But I was saying that in this report, it shows that 28 or 29 million out of that is outstanding monies for work that has already been done. And it corroborates what we've been trying to say.
Madam President, the member is not standing on a point of order to refute what I just said.
Proceed, Senator.
Thank you. So, Madam President, as I was saying, and we go into that draft agreement, because if it's one thing, God don't like liars. And the people of St. Lucia want you to be honest with them. When we go...
Senator Joa here, let's have some...
My apologies, Madam President. When we go to page 8 of 28 of that agreement, you think I come in here and just saying things off the top of my head? We always speak on a point of fact. Listen to that, member opposite. Section 6. The company has commenced the works on the effective date of this agreement. The work shall be completed within 9 months. And I repeat, the company has commenced the works on the effective date of this agreement. Why are you coming to this house to tell St. Lucians that we have to pay Fresh Start 70 million for works that has already been done, when the agreement is saying that as of 15th July 2021, that their work will commence on the date of the signing of this agreement? That was 7 days before the election, Madam President. You're not even in office. You demit office. The Governor General has dissolved Parliament. May you like a signed contract, Pookie. 70 million to be paid in 1 year, Madam President? What kind of thing is that? You want to talk about transparency. You want to talk about accountability. I move over to page 26, and Madam President, we will make it a document of the House. I move over to page 26 because you want to talk, and you started your presentation about the people of St. Lucia are frustrated. They were not frustrated for the last 6 years. The frustration of the pothole just magically come up in there from since July 26, 2021. The member for Grosile, who was a former cabinet member, former national sportsman, who should have, the member of Grosile is related to me. Excuse me, let us not mislead people. The former member is not a relative. There's absolutely no relation, Madam President. But I was saying, that former member who formulated a club called Orion Sports, or Orion Track and Field, sat in cabinet, decided that instead of prioritizing to get sportsmen and women their stadium back, that he will mash up a road on the Corinth Highway that had absolutely no problem and then try and fix it. Why? For people to see. All that glitters is not gold. Then there was another one who was a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports, who was also a former president of the St. Lucia Olympic Committee. 6 years could not prioritize the sportsmen and women of St. Lucia. But as soon as you're out of office, you're outside of the hospital, making a joke out of people with a placard, you want your St. Jude. Another one who they say was faster than a bullet from Dennery South was actually, at the time, the Minister of Youth Development and Sports, Madam President. He could not prioritize getting the people out of the St. Jude Hospital, out of the George Odlum Stadium. The cabinet with the most, and I want St. Lucians to hear this, the cabinet with the most former national sports personalities, the most former national sports personalities, men and women, could not see that for 13 years, getting people out of the George Odlum Stadium was a priority for young people, not just in the south of the island, but in the north. Y'all did not care about Javier Ford. Y'all did not care about the people of the south. Because if y'all did, you would have made it a priority. Madam President, think about it. The south represents 40% of our population, you know. That St. Jude Hospital services our only international airport. God forbid something would have happened. And you want to talk about your priority is to build 23 islands. Whilst people are suffering in a sports stadium that is there as a temporary location for healthcare. Chuvala Kapwe AC. Horses in containers in AC. And people they're dying. And you want to talk about the frustration of St. Lucians. Page 26 of that same contract spoke of the heartless doings of the United Workers' Party administration. Because if the government would have defaulted in 10 days of paying Fresh Start their money in that 1 year, if they defaulted on a payment of 10 days, they would have to pay 1%. Let me tell you, you know what that would come to? About $2 million. And we're not even counting interest. 70 million in a year divided by 12 months. What's that? About almost $6 to $7 million a month to give your FFF. And the people of the South, you're making a mockery of them. Complete disregard and disrespect for the people of Beaufort. Today you want to come to talk about their frustration, Madam President. And we know that the original structure was approved, but your structure was not approved. You don't have final drawings. You don't even have a final cost. And you cannot, St. Lucia, you cannot even understand what the cost overruns would be because you don't have a final cost to compare it to. And what does a member of Castries Central call it? A cash cow. Because you don't know where the paint is, you don't know where the tiles is, you don't know where a lot of things are. And you commission raids to terrorize and traumatize people. And houses being built in Babono, houses being built everywhere, yellow paints. Even for a box, the cost of security was over 600,000. Y'all know what a box is? A box. And I cannot even call it a complete box, Madam President, because we are now discovering that to complete the roof, we need an additional 16 million. Why can't the SLP administration give you a final cost now? Because we are discovering that we still owe people. Up until Tuesday, we heard of new discoveries of monies that are owed to people for one floor, Madam President. $118 million for an incomplete floor. And then they want to use COVID as an excuse. I heard the sitting member for Choiseul Saltibus talking about COVID. When did COVID hit St. Lucia? COVID started coming to people in February of 2020. Did you come into office in 2020? Did you come into office in 2019? You came into office in 2016, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It was already 5 years, Madam President. So that COVID excuse cannot be used. That COVID excuse cannot be used. And what I realized was there is absolutely no defense from the UWP as to why they could not complete the hospital. There is absolutely no defense, Madam President. And you want to come and talk about we following blindly. People of St. Lucia ask us, why are we coming to this house to debate St. Jude again? And I want people to understand that when we have all the information, we have a responsibility. It is our duty to speak to you and tell you exactly what happened with your money. We are accountable to the people of St. Lucia, Madam President, and not only to ourselves. So when we talk about 14 direct awards given for the reconstruction project for the gray and yellow box, 14 direct contracts awarded, Madam President, none through the tendering process. You want to talk about accountability? You want to talk about transparency? You are not in a position to stand here today and defend that, because there is nothing you can defend. The only thing you can admit, Madam President, is that you failed yet again to deliver one project to the people of St. Lucia. The member wants to talk about his expertise is in tourism. We can spend another debate talking about what the United Workers' Party achieved in tourism, you know. Not one hotel room they were able to deliver in their 6 years in office. And we have a new man here coming and showing you how tourism should be handled in St. Lucia. They don't want us to build a port, Madam President. And I listened, it was so sad. I listened to the member from Miku South. After he, in my opinion, wasted the time of the people, for the first half hour of his presentation, reading from a report that we all had access to. They're yawning, they want to try and distract. I will not be distracted. Listen, we all had access to that report. He spent the last 10 minutes of his time trying to make a plea to the people of St. Lucia. And I'm saying, why do these people think we are foolish, Madam President? Why do they think that they can come here and blatantly lie, blatantly speak mistruths? And I have to come and read from the same contract that y'all had on your desk to tell you exactly what you do. We cannot trust anything that the United Workers' Party tells the people of St. Lucia. They gave us a date. They promised the completion of the hospital. I think it was December 2020 or December 2019. Excuse me if I have that incorrect. When the Minister for Economic Affairs at the time gave the completion date of St. Jude. But as it stands, Madam President, only one floor. I am learning that it might even take us about 270 million to complete that structure. But Madam President, St. Lucians need to understand why it is not feasible, why it is not fiscally prudent for this SLP administration to continue that structure. The previous structure was over 80% complete. The amount of money that will take us to complete that is far less than the debt that the United Workers' Party have left us with. And I really want to commend our Prime Minister for taking the opportunity to bring those facts to the people, because we need to know. People were shocked by the presentation by the member for ancillary canneries, who gave us a breakdown of all the things that they spend that money on, Madam President, that you cannot even see. But Madam President, we are supposed to come here to talk about the review. The reports, the review, well, the final reports of the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. We have given the people of St. Lucia a fair account of our position as to why we cannot continue with that box. We have also given St. Lucians an honest analysis of our fiscal situation in St. Lucia, Madam President. And so we are at a place where we can finally say things are moving along. Now they want to tell people that since y'all have been in office, y'all have not even started work. And that is not true, Madam President. Because 2-3 months ago, November 2022, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia did announce that work had recommenced on the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. Of course, it would start with exterior works, and as time progresses, we will see more, we will hear more from the government of St. Lucia on the delivery of the St. Jude Hospital. You want to give people an official completion date, considering the circumstances we are faced with, Madam President. Of course, the Russian war on Ukraine, we still have a lot of supply chain issues. Our Prime Minister will not just stay there and just spit out dates like a madman, because people are looking for hope. And I think it is a very good thing for him to give us that hope and that promise, Madam President.
Senator Joa, here you have 15 minutes to complete your
Thank
contribution.
You. I'm wrapping up. And I think it's very wise of our Prime Minister, Madam President, to just inform us that he promises that he will deliver the hospital within the time frame that the people of St. Lucia has given this SLP administration to govern. And so I want to tell the people of St. Jude, you have something to look forward to. I want my grandmother, my family, my friends, those who live in cantonment to understand that they have something to look forward to. I want the sportsmen and women of St. Lucia to know, Miss Naomi London from Beaufort North, that she has something to look forward to, because she has to still go train in that stadium, Madam President, and the conditions are not best for the athletes, neither is it ideal for the workers of the hospital. I just want St. Lucians to know, Madam President, that very soon they will have their hospital. We are moving forward with this project. The people of St. Lucia have given us a mandate. Our priorities was first to stabilize this economy, because we came out of that COVID era. And so now, as we are slowly recovering from that, we are seeing more things being done under this administration. I want to extend my full and unbridled support for the acceptance of the report of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Committee. Thank you.
Senator Toussaint Shalry.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave, as has been iterated by some of my colleagues before me, that this is the first time for 2023 that we are meeting. And so I would like to extend New Year greetings and all that is good for my colleague senators, as well as St. Lucians, both here and abroad. I do wish them all the best in 2023, and that 2023 will be a year where dreams will be realized, where we will have greater health, greater wealth, and all the other things that we look forward to having for ourselves. I also want to join my Senate colleagues in extending condolences to our colleague Senator Alison Jeux on the passing of her father. She is in our thoughts and in our prayers. I also want to, Madam President, bring to the fore that this month, January, is recognized as Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, and it's being observed under the theme of ending cervical cancer within a few generations. And as a lady myself, I would like to take this opportunity to forewarn and to sound an air of caution to women and young girls that the best way to ensure that we combat cervical cancer is to ensure that they get screened early, because early detection is key. So I urge our young women to do their pap smears regularly, to speak with your healthcare providers, your nurse, your doctor, your medical practitioner, to ensure that you do whatever is necessary in the fight to ending cervical cancer within a few generations. I now turn my attention to the substantive matter before us, Madam President. Madam President, I am a daughter of the south of St. Lucia. And I do appreciate as well that the matter of St. Jude Hospital is not a southern matter, but rather a national matter. But the reality is we cannot run away from the fact that St. Jude's Hospital is located in Vieux Fort. Madam President, on the dreadful night of September 9th, 2009, more than 13 years ago, the lives which were lost in that fire, most of them, or in fact all three of them, were persons that I knew personally. The Jabatis family of Piero were persons that I basically grew up with. I remember picking eggs from the fowl coop with that father who perished in that fire. And so the circumstances of that event are very dear to me and very personal to me. The families of those persons who perished in the fire are people that I interact with almost on a daily basis. And the cries remain the same, that more than 13 years later, They do not feel well about the fact that a St. Jude's has not been given to the people of St. Lucia. And so they feel the pain of not just the loss of their family, but the loss of an institution that meant so much to us in that belt of St. Lucia. Like Senator Ferdinand and leader of government business, or unlike him, I actually birthed my son there. He visited his son, but I birthed my son there in just before the fire. And so again, there is sentimental attachment to that institution. Madam President, we need to establish very, very clearly that the onus to deliver the St. Jude Hospital is that of the government of the day.
Amen.
And we've had more than one government, Madam President, but the onus is on the government, not the citizens of St. Lucia, but the government of St. Lucia, because healthcare is a public good. I have not brought out my pom-poms. I want to make that clear, Madam President. I have not brought out my pom-poms today. And the reason is because there has been so much back and forth on that particular institution, the St. Jude's Hospital. From the inception of that fire in 2009 up to this day, there has been so much back and forth, so much confusion, so much misinformation, so many things have happened that the people, and I don't speak just for me, I have the confidence that this government will deliver for the people. And my reason is because I trust that the Honorable Prime Minister of this country, in the person of Honorable Philip J. Pierre, is passionate enough and is sensitive enough towards the needs of the unfortunate and the disadvantaged people of this country. And I think he understands well enough. The lessons have been there. The lesson of the former Minister of Economic Affairs saying to the people of this country that if they did not finish St. Jude Hospital, that they were not to vote for them. And the people listened. The people listened. Madam President, the Bible, the good book that most of us believe in, it teaches us of the power of the tongue. And the then Minister of Economic Affairs made a bold pronouncement and the people listened. So I do believe that Honorable Philip J. Pierre understands all too well that not completing the hospital will be an act of political suicide. And so based on that, I do believe that there is a level of hope that he has given us as people of this country when it comes to St. Jude's Hospital. Madam President, we've heard over the last few days the chronology of the life of St. Jude's Hospital from 2009. In 2009, was the fire. In 2010, work started under the Honorable Stephenson King, now Member of Parliament for Castries North. In 2011, there were elections and Kenny Anthony became the Prime Minister. And it is important to note, Madam President, that under the Dr. Kenny Anthony administration, that work continued on that hospital night and day. And I found myself, Madam President, in a very precarious situation of joining in the refrain of Kenny should have finished the hospital. I was part of it, Madam President. As a patriotic St. Lucian, I said it too, that Dr. Kenny Anthony, the then parliamentary rep of Beaufort South, providing that the hospital was in his constituency, he had a responsibility to the people of St. Lucia to finish the hospital. I still do believe that, except when the information came out, we understood, Madam President, that it was a period marred with a lot of financial issues, the effects of the economic conditions, the natural disasters that occurred, and all of these really put a damper on the progress of the project, Madam President. In 2016, we had elections, and Alan Chasney became the Prime Minister of this country under a UWP regime. And Madam President, what happened then is that construction halted on the hospital for 3 years. And that is significant, Madam President. It is significant and significantly different from the period before that, where a Prime Minister, despite the financial constraints, continued work on the hospital day and night, albeit at a pace that was not fast enough to complete it by the calling of general elections. But the Alan Chasney administration, yo dubu tout avale l'hôpital pour toi l'année, Madame Président. Et moi ne pour dubu ici à Odia. Écoutez, Sénateur Fede, qui était part of gouvernement ça là, qui dubu l'hôpital pour toi l'année. Moi Tony Aboueza ka parler about Jean Setlissi. They're frustrated and they're tired. But they were frustrated in the 3 years. Toi l'année pas clouki cloué pas bloc qui acide. We were frustrated then, Madam President. Did Senator Fede come out and speak of the frustration of the people then? And so we ask ourselves, and to borrow from the words of our political leader and Prime Minister, what is this? Flashing mirrors, Madam President? Where was his voice then to speak up for the people of St. Lucia and the people of the South about their frustration? Madam President, in the UWP manifesto leading up to the last general election, the then political leader who won that general elections in that period, he stated that the situation at St. Jude's Hospital, which continues to be housed in the National Stadium after almost 5 years of SLP rule, highlights the insensitivity of this administration to both the persons needing health services and the youth. That was the words of Alan Chasney, Madam President. Il dit, situation, te ka parler about SLP pa melek se mouna. But almost 6 years afterwards, he delivered nothing to the people of St. Lucia. Am I supposed to then assume that it also speaks of his insensitivity towards the persons needing health services and the youth, Madam President? He went on to say that the sick are being held in dilapidated conditions, while the young people are being denied access to sporting facilities. The new UWP government, he pronounced, will, as a matter of urgency, complete the hospital that was started years ago. That was the words of the political leader of the United Workers' Party in the manifesto, Madam President. But more than 5 years later, they did nothing about it. So what became of this statement? Was that a statement made simply to show colors to the people of St. Lucia like he did for his entire reign as Prime Minister of this country, to show renderings and rhetorics and nice words? File lang, Madam President? Is that what it was? He said it himself, that the SLP government was insensitive to keep the people there, but he kept the people there almost 6 years. Almost 6 years. And so it is no wonder that, and they talk about, the opposition talks about 18 months since this current government has taken over the realms of this country. 18 months as compared to the 3 years that they stopped construction, and the almost 6 years that they remained the governing party of this country, Madam President. They pretend they forget, Madam President, selective amnesia. Madam President, during the reign of the last administration, we were dealt a blow by COVID-19. And so the people of the south of St. Lucia, providing the fact that the Victoria Hospital was then converted into the respiratory hospital, the only respiratory facility on the island, Madam President. And I dare say that if perhaps St. Jude's Hospital had already been completed in its rightful place, in a place where the nurses and doctors and the staff of St. Jude's Hospital could have maneuvered better, that I am pretty sure that a part of that hospital would have been used or could have been used as a respiratory point or respiratory center for the south of St. Lucia. But you know what had to happen? The men and women of the St. Lucia Fire Service, the ambulance service, were tasked with the responsibility to transport people from the south in the middle of the night, in the wee hours of the morning, to the north of the island, because it was the only respiratory hospital, the only space that people could have gone to. And so, up to a day like today, the St. Lucia Fire Service, the ambulance service, they're still suffering the effects of the wear and tear and the exhaustion that they had to suffer having to do that, Madam President. you'd say that this is not insensitive. You say that this is not uncaring. You say that this was not simply a case of that certain parts of St. Lucia were simply not under the radar of the previous administration. And I remember my colleague Senator Jawai spoke earlier of a certain persons within that then cabinet who were themselves national sports luminaries of their time. And I remember one of them clearly stating that the National Stadium was too far removed from people. She said it, that the National Stadium in Viewfort was too far removed from people. And Madam President, it continues to speak of an administration under the United Workers' Party who have shown gross indifference to the people of the south of the island. All they do is that they promise them things that, like my colleague Senator indicated, pie in the sky things, not the real tangible things that matter to us, like the St. Jude's Hospital. Madam President, some things are simply unescapable, and it would really be remiss of me today. A friend of mine told me yesterday afternoon while I was leaving work, he said to me, I'll be glued to my TV because I need to hear what you are going to say about the issue of St. Jude's Hospital. And he said to me, I'll be waiting for you at the gates of the fishing port on Friday morning. When you see my face, it will tell in terms of how I deciphered what you said. And so it would be remiss of me not to speak up, Madam President, for the people of the South, the people of this country, the citizens of St. Lucia, who have remained without a proper hospital facility for so long. Madam President, on Sunday, unfortunately, I had to be at the St. Jude Hospital. A very close relative of mine was taken to the hospital, and of course I had to be there to ensure that whatever needed to be done had to be done. And I'm walking into the triage area at the John Odlum National Stadium, and I was confused when I walk into the area because the area has now been turned back to front. And this is the reality of what has happened in that space over time. We have to commend the doctors, the nurses, the administration of St. Jude Hospital for what they have been able to do in the space. Over time, we have seen all kind of departments and all kind of pieces move from everywhere. Yonjou ale la porte emergency à côté, l'autre jour ale à l'autre côté, dimanche triage te à l'autre côté passé les moitié la semaine passée. Because they've really tried to continue to deliver the level of service that we had come to know in the South. And the reality is, we talk about the phase one and the original site and so on and how inadequate it is. How would you talk to me about the inadequacy of that space when these doctors and nurses and other staff of the hospital and the patients have had to live in the George Odom National Stadium, a space not built at all for anything medical, but they've had to maneuver in it for more than 13 years. And you talk to me about the superiority of a box, that this is what will change the face of health provision in this island. I dare say that's not the case. The real provision of health in this country is the people who are responsible for administering it. That is the most important thing. And if they survived in the stadium for so long, they can go back to their original site with the improvements that have been made and will be made over the years, Madam President. The George Odom Stadium, like I said, was not designed for a hospital, but it has been used over time. And so the argument of that the original site was built so many decades ago, the doors too small, the ceiling too low. And I understand that there have been improvements in terms of medical care. But whilst I sat there listening to Senator Fede say that, something struck me, and I wondered, had the fire not happened in 2009 that started this change, this construction of the St. Jude's Hospital, would we have already within that space of time accounted for an entirely new hospital space if in fact the fire did not happen? And so when I hear people talk about the inadequacy of the space and that it was so many decades ago, I really wonder about that. And so let's explore what has happened, Madam President. Like I indicated, the UW administration under Alan Chasney decided that it was best to begin construction on an entirely new space. And so the question is, was there any regard given to the cost implications of that space? And we've heard the numbers. And I'm not going to repeat the numbers here, Madam President. But my question is, was there any regard given to the cost implications? The cost of these contracts that had been awarded, the number of years it would take us to come out of the quagmire in terms of the cost. Was there any consideration given to the time implications? And again, I mentioned earlier that, they speak of 18 months, you all have been in government, 18 months and nothing has been done. But for 3 years, work was completely halted, Madam President. I remember being at driving school and getting to the Joy Juice Gap, and I slowed down, and my instructor told me the sign says stop. So all of the tires must stop engagement with the asphalt. Stop. That's what they did. They didn't slow down on construction, Madam President. Your party slow down. Your party reduce speed of the construction. Your do but put alone eka boise yo ka parler about 18 mois. Gouvernement sa pouvoir ek yo poko fait rien. What is the comparison? How many 18 months can you find in 3 years? Was there any consideration or thought given to the preservation of the history of the place? These are some of the questions that are foremost in my mind. And of course, I am not opposed to new and fancy and glittery things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to new things. I'm not opposed to fancy things. But the question is always at what cost, and what is the opportunity cost of taking these decisions? Madam President, I have already recognized the efforts of the staff at St. Jude's Hospital for what they've been able to do in managing over the years. On the 23rd of September 2021, Madam President, most of us inside of here, with the Parliament staff, paid a visit to the St. Jude's reconstruction site. It was only then that I got a glimpse of the alternate reality that we existed in. Because the only other reference I could have made to what was going on there is what I had seen on TV and what I had heard on the radio. And there was a lot of hype, Madam President, about this structure that was going up. And there was a lot of talk about the cladding and this and that and so on. And the impression that we had gotten, and the member opposite a while ago spoke about dates, that so many dates were given. Madam President, over the last 13 years, both administrations had given dates. Both administrations had given dates of completion and that were shifted. Dates that were shifted, goalposts that were shifted, but he seemed to only remember it in one period of time. But Madam President, I'm telling you, I was shocked. I was utterly shocked when I actually saw what was going on down there. And I think there are certain people who we expected who ought to have known as well, and I think they were just as shocked because they were the one asking the questions about the lines and the service lines and so on when we expected that they should have known. So I suspect I was not the only one shocked and confused about what actually went down there. Madam President, what I saw on TV, like I declared, it looked glamorous, it looked nice, but when you walked in there and you noticed that the amount of things on the inside of the beautiful cladding that were undone, untouched, unfinished, unaccounted for, that you could not understand. I mean, some people would probably be able to read the plans and know that this was going there or this was going there. But all I saw was little metal things where partitions and so on were supposed to be. That's what I saw. That is what I saw. And the words of the construction persons on the site and the engineers on the site was the reality is that they could not tell how long it would take for them to get to a state of completion. And the member opposite continued to talk about the ground floor, but initially that was not what was sold to St. Lucians. What was sold to St. Lucians was a complete thing. It was at some point when they realized that election was just around the corner and they would not have been able to deliver the complete thing, they stopped work again. They stopped again and they went back to the drawing boards to try to figure out how they can fit the entire hospital in the ground floor. And after they had moved the people, then they would have continued with the top floor. That's what we got, Madam President. That's what we got. Let's not forget that. And they need to be honest about that. Plan c'était pour tirer moun à stadium là, mettez you on the ground floor, what we refer to as the box now. Et wal ça te ka fait travail en l'air. Mais c'est pas ça yo te ka dit Saint-Lucien. Yo te bay Saint-Lucien date pour whole bagay la te pa wek pour Saint-Jude te entrer en dedans. Et là yo réaliser élection te just there corner. Mais c'est yo fait si magui madame président pour yo pas te couiller élection because yo savent choisir de yon te bagay la qui te kay fait Saint-Lucien savent pour vous c'est connait yo te ka connait nous tout temps ça. And St. Lucian spoke loudly, Madam President. The lies were revealed, the mistruths, the untruths were revealed, the glitters were gone, they were washed away, Madam President, and we saw the truth. Madam President, I remember listening to the talk show host Christopher Hunt, and I saw the pictures of leaking roofs, etc. And the reality is, from my vantage point in front of my TV, I said, "Sap halfway," because I wanted to trust in Minister of Tubagay when he gave us the reports of what was going on. And I remember very well always asking myself, boy, why the Minister of Health not come in and tell us the truth? Because she had a way of letting certain things escape her mouth unknowingly to her. They would just jump out. And so I guess that is why they understood very well that she could not have done the PR. Because if she had done the PR, St. Lucians would have known the truth. And I got to know the truth on September 23rd when I visited and walked the site. Madam President, what this site reminded me of, it sent me back to a period, Madam President. In 2018, the St. Lucia Labour Party held its annual general conference at the Labrie Boys School. The guest speaker on that day, Dr. Tennyson Joseph. And one of the things that resonated with me in his address to the gathering was the story of the emperor's new clothes. And the story of the emperor being naked. And Madam President, on September 23rd, when I walked through that box, Madam President, it really reminded me of that story. Because here we were seeing this thing all looking good on the outside until you went on the inside, Madam President. Madam President, bon matin, comment tu as reflété les présentations, Madam President, et moi changer teacher mon parole ça là. It brought me to a reality, Madam President. Madam President, as a young individual, now normally we get the story on the other side from the male perspective on the potential wife or the potential girlfriend. But I will give it on the other side. That as a young lady, perhaps looking for a potential partner, you walk into a place and you see this gentleman, man, bien debout, peut-être un bel petit couillet wayayay, de la chiveni yon dirty waves called leader of government business, Madam President. And you think to yourself that can be it. That can be it. So you approach a gentleman, Madam President, et vous try une conversation et puis, Madam President, et qui passe à dire your sentence coherently, Madam President. That is what we got in that box, Madam President. It was empty.
Vacuous.
Madam President, excuse me a bit, but I get really emotional when I speak of St. Jude's because until you're in it, like my Senate colleague said, you don't understand what it really means. Madam President, on Sunday, my grandmother, who we had taken to the hospital, she was laid on a stretcher in the hallway. She was laid on a stretcher in the hallway. That's where the doctor in emergency came to deal with her, Madam President. I am eternally grateful for the doctors at St. Jude Hospital. Dr. Blanchard, who was there on Sunday evening, a past classmate of mine. And yeah, doctor, and a past student of leader of government business, a member of the constituency where he lives as well, the neighboring constituency of Mikud South. He did his job to the best of his ability with the resources he had at his disposal. But it was really sad to see persons lined up in the hallway on stretchers, on beds, on wheelchairs, Madam President. Madam President, even Senator Fede, the day we made the visit, I remember some of the questions he asked. And I remember chiding him and asking whether it was the first time that he had been there. Because some of the questions that he asked, in my opinion, they were not supposed to be questions asked by a member who was part of a government, who commissioned the building who started that building. But I don't know what it was. He can be a very tricky fella, so I'm not sure what it was. Now, Madam President, under the Philip J. Pierre administration, a review committee was put together. And it is important for the nation to note, Madam President, that this review commission cost this nation $1 million, less than $1 million. Let's do the maths, Madam President. That's what it cost this country to do that review. And like my colleagues before me have said, I have no issues with paying professionals for their work. They've gone to school, they know their stuff. You pay them for what they do. You engage the services of a lawyer, you pay for the services, Madam President. But a conscientious Prime Minister who understands that a lot of monies have been used, misused, and used and misused over and over the last 13 years, understood that the most prudent and accountable thing to do for the people of St. Lucia was to win over the hearts of professionals in this country who have an interest in the national development of this country and get them to sit down and do an independent review costing this country and taxpayers $0, Madam President, and that's noteworthy. Madam President, on page 49 of the report, you will find the terms of reference of the committee. Am I correct on page 49? I do not want to do like my colleague and misquote things, Madam President. Yes, on page 49, the terms of reference of the review committee. And in section 3, it says that the purpose of the committee was to review options for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital and to advise Cabinet on the feasibility and requirements for an immediate move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum Stadium to the original St. Jude's site. And it's important to note, Madam President, that the committee, albeit free of charge, was not given a mandate to tell us or to tell the Philip J. Pierre administration to ensure that the recommendation was to move back to the original one.
Senator, you have 15 minutes to complete.
Thank you, Madam President. It was not to mandate that they made that recommendation. It was simply to determine the feasibility and the requirements to move and transfer the operations from the George Odlum Stadium in the shortest possible time. And I think we're missing out on that fundamental aspect of it. Madam President, Sanuka try faire c'est assis qui c'est docteur c'est nosla exceptement là de la qui en l'hôpital là yo sorti en stadium là plus vite qui possible. That is the fundamental thing that we ensuring that happens, Madam President. And so if it will take more time and more resources to complete the box, then it can't be the more feasible option, because there is a time factor that we have to take into consideration, Madam President. And the other thing that is noteworthy, Madam President, is that even when the phase 2, the new structure was happening, we understood as well that there were certain aspects of the original site that would have been incorporated into the new site. And so to me, what it speaks of is something that directly juxtaposes what we've heard before, that the old site was many decades ago. That's true, but it means if certain aspects of it could have been incorporated, then that means there is value in them. That means l'ania baya da yo ki bon toujou ek nou sa servi yo. And so it is in direct contradiction to what we've heard bandied around, Madam President. And Madam President, one of the things that has been, talked about over the last few days is why a debate on St. Jude's Hospital now? And Madam President, I want to make that abundantly clear from my understanding of it, and I do not speak for the Prime Minister or the Cabinet of Ministers. For me, what I understand that this debate does is that there is a need for the people to know what's going on. For so many years, we've heard so many things, and the question is which version of the story is correct, Madam President. And so this has given us as St. Lucians an opportunity to hear, to know, to understand the reality of what has been happening. And we have to appreciate as well, Madam President, and I think the leader of government business mentioned it in his presentation, that school children, I wasn't at school at the time of the fire, but I remember my younger brother and sister then at the Vigier Primary School. On more than one occasion, I gave them money to contribute towards the rebuilding efforts at St. Jude's Hospital. My brother and my sister are now adults contributing to the tax, to paying taxes in this country. And so, of course, we have a responsibility to them and others like them to tell them, qui ça qui ja fait avec l'argent, yo te bay, Madam President. It is an opportunity to quiet out the widespread speculation. It's an opportunity to deal with the apparent issues of misappropriation and malappropriation. It is an opportunity to determine, to make informed decisions about the allegations of corruption. An opportunity for full disclosure. That's what I understand it to be. And I also want to take this opportunity to applaud the Honorable Philip J. Pierre in an effort again to ensure that there is accountability and transparency, to have given an opportunity, Madam President, to the members of the House of Assembly and the Senate to bring before the people the arguments, the documents, and so on, so that the people of St. Lucia, the people who really matter, will be part of what is going on, Madam President. And that is a thing that we have to applaud the Honorable Prime Minister for taking that step. And of course, there are things that may have been unfavorable to a Labour administration in terms of the documents and the information, but guess what? He did not hide them away. He did not hide them away. Good or bad, he brought them before the people, the very people who elected him to sit in the chair of the Prime Minister of this country, Madam President, and that is applaudable. Madam President, there are certain things, and it's not often that I agree with Senator Fede, but I think two things he said today, and I just want to reiterate my agreement for them. One, that St. Lucians are frustrated over the St. Jude's Hospital fiasco, and two, that we need to rise above the partisan politics, because people are suffering and expectations are being killed when we do not do that. And so I'm hoping that he, having made that statement, understands as well the implication of that statement, and may he be the first to fall in line to rise above the partisan politics that St. Jude's Hospital has been enveloped in. It is my opinion that he quoted from John Peters, and he said wastage was already happening. How then do we dim the period between 2016 and 2021, Madam President? How dare the senator speak of a period of wastage but excludes the period where he was part of the cabinet? So there was no wastage there, Madam President. Is that what he's trying to mislead St. Lucians into believing? That there was no misappropriation, there was no wastage then? Madam President, we have to be careful. I started by saying that the tongue is powerful. The Bible speaks about the power of the tongue, and the senator needs to be careful about the things that he pronounces, Madam President. He also indicated that the cost of building material has escalated considerably. And I want to repeat that, Madam President, because I know there will be a time when he will question certain figures. And I need him to remember that he has already set a tone now by indicating his knowledge of the fact of that cost of building materials has escalated. I want to ensure that he keeps that in mind, because it will be useful to him at some point in time, Madam President. And Madam President, I want to end by indicating that I have given my full support to the review committee's report. And I do look forward to the completion of the St. Jude's Hospital, and the nurses and doctors and other health practitioners and staff and patients who frequent the St. Jude's Hospital to be in a space that is more conducive to the provision of health care and their well-being. And I end with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi, which says, "It is health that is real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver." And I think that this quote is so significant, Madam President, because whilst we talk about St. Jude's, we talk about the box, which is painted in gold. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, in the same manner that my colleagues who have gone before me have started, allow me to begin by wishing you a Happy New Year, and same to my colleagues on both sides of the House, and to St. Lucia as a whole. I hope, Madam President, that 2023 will be a brighter and more successful year than those that have gone before. I also wish to extend condolences to Senator Zhe on the passing of her father. Having been through that experience, Madam President, I understand just how traumatic and sad that can be. So I wish her well. And also to our colleague Senators Aziz and Podius, who I understand are under the weather, I wish them well in short order. And I also wish to congratulate our new Senator Wilson. Welcome to the chamber, and I hope that you will enjoy the exchanges that go on here. Madam President, as I've listened to, I listened to the debate on Tuesday, and as I've listened to the speakers gone before me, I might be aging myself slightly, but I feel like I'm trapped in an episode of The Twilight Zone. A rather tawdry horror story where, although a lot has been said, I feel no more informed than I did before. If the definitive history of the St. Jude reconstruction project is ever to be written, it is surely going to be an interesting one, but it's going to be a catalogue of failures. Failures of planning, failures of project management, failures of financial management, and failures of political decision-making. But perhaps the biggest failure has been one of governance generally. The failure of the proper development and finalization of St. Jude, this fiasco that we are all debating on today, is largely because our system of government as a whole is fundamentally damaged, and I dare say broken. The executive has been allowed to do whatever it wants unchecked for years. And sadly, St. Jude is not the only example of this. I know at some point we're going to get to HIA and the story that is. But when you look at it at base, the causes are almost identical. The first past the post winner take all system that we currently operate under is interpreted generally as licensed by the ruling party to do whatever it wants. I've won, so you can't tell me. I'm going to make the decisions. And where construction, when we look at it, has been started and stopped just because you've had an election call and a government change, the only check, the only minor check that has happened or that we've had on that executive power has been those elections and the choices of the electorate. For the last 3 elections, St. Jude has been the decisive election issue. And yet, still strangely, none of the political parties seem any more encouraged, so to speak, to do something about it. They come out and roll out all the platitudes. St. Jude's is wonderful. We need to do something about it. We're going to fix it. But this is the 3rd successive administration where St. Jude has been an issue and it has still not been fixed. It appears that the project has been undertaken without a cohesive or coherent plan for construction or operation. And in fact, if such a plan does exist, the details have never been disclosed or shared. And I speak to both phase 1 or phase 2 if I adopt the language of the report. I'm not going to get into box, not box, those sorts of things. Indeed, the most puzzling aspect of this whole debacle is that the last government, and I heard it there this morning, it's to me, they're not even hearing the irony of the statements being made. The last government seems not to have learned anything from the errors and the missteps of the preceding Labour government. I cannot fathom how they've chosen to repeat or in fact surpass the errors that were taken or occurred during the construction of phase 1. And you heard it this morning being said, there was no proper design, there was no complete DCA approval, there was no complete financing package, there was no plan for the transition from the George Odlum Stadium into St. Jude. But if you can identify, could have identified, did identify all those errors with phase 1, why on heaven's earth would you then reproduce them? In fact, in greater and grander scale with regard to phase 2. At the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, is this really what the people of St. Lucia deserve? Is that what they have constantly, and the politicians recognize it, have constantly made the call for St. Jude to be completed? Is this kind of reckless, unconcerned behavior what they are asking for? Furthermore, the DCA and the other public officials have to be recognized as being complicit in this disaster. When you look at the fact that DCA approvals are either incomplete or you're having special carve-outs being made to allow things to proceed, you have to ask yourself again, what is really going on? By not ensuring that the components necessary for full approval were in place, they have contributed to the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been wasted on the 2 phases. And another thing that strikes me, Madam President, is we are bandying about the sums of money that have been expended on this project. And it's almost, I've heard figures so often that, to be honest, Madam President, I've almost become numb. 80 million here, 118 million, another 60 million to complete. Almost like these sums of money you could just pick up by the side of the road. Over $200 million have been spent on these 2 incomplete development projects. But if you want to put, Madam President, if we want to put that into some sort of context, that's enough money to have given every single St. Lucian $1 million in their pocket and let them do whatever they need to do with their health care. But instead, we have put this money into the ground. We titivate as to what we should do with it. We've lost 3 years. We've lost another 18 months. I'm going to come to that in a little bit more detail. And we are now coming back to agree to spend additional money. Sadly, we are in a situation where we have no choice, and it must be done. But the point I want to make is that we have to fix the structures to ensure that this does not happen going forward. We as parliamentarians in particular have failed demonstrably in our role of oversight of the executive. We have to take the blame for St. Jude because we have failed to hold investigations through select committees, which we are empowered to do under the standing orders. We have failed to interrogate the executive as to what is really going on in St. Jude. If there was ever an appropriate situation for the exercise of our investigative powers, this is it. I understand why we're having a debate and the fact that, as my colleagues senators have pointed out, there's need to put information out. Although, as I said, I do not know that I'm any more informed having listened to the debates than I was before. But the power of investigation would allow us to go deeper, would allow us to go further and have a better understanding of what has gone wrong and how to fix it. The debate is not a substitute for our oversight function. The value of the debate has been weakened by the fact that it is being based on cherry-picked information. As I listened to the debate in the Law House, and again this morning, a famous quote from Mark Twain came to mind when he was talking about the types of lies. I'm not saying anybody's lying, but the types of lies. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. I want to paraphrase it a little bit and say, in fact, that there are lies, damn lies, and the information that politicians want you to know. There have been at least 4 reports that I know of on the St. Jude Hospital construction project. You have what has been called the Shanta King handover report, the Halcrow handover report, the audit, the construction audit that was done in 2017, and finally, the final report and recommendations on the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. It's interesting, Madam President, that out of all of those reports, only one has been laid in the House. People have made comments and are quoting from sections. I see some have shown up on my desk this morning. I guess persons have decided to finally make them, lay them before the House as papers. But the fact is, really and truly, this is way late. These documents ought to have been laid properly before Parliament long ago, so that we could have monitored the process, had a full debate at the time, and not come to this situation far removed from these activities, because this is 13 years we've been building this. If we continue at the rate we continue, there have been persons who would have been born before the St. Jude fire who would not have been able to go to St. Jude before voting. They would almost be adults. As I said, Madam President, persons have been quoting their favorite sections of the reports, obviously cherry-picking the sections that support their position. And they keep them secret, trotting them out only when it's convenient to their purpose. Proper and effective governance requires information and transparency. Corruption and maladministration thrive in darkness. The light of transparency and disclosure must shine on the operations of government if our democracy and our country are to grow and develop. Madam President, constitutional reform is essential to ensure that we don't have these situations continuing. We need to separate the executive from the legislature so that the oversight function, which is an inherent part of the separation of powers doctrine that underlies our form of democracy, can operate properly. It is only then that we can ensure that the executive is held accountable for their actions. As I said, there's a lot of irony going on in the debate today. Previously, I don't understand why the government is attacking, the opposition is attacking the government whilst doing exactly the same thing they've done. But further to that, we are being asked to advise Cabinet on a report that they commissioned, on a report that they've had, and they've sat on for at least a year, on decisions that they've already taken to some extent. I agree to the debate, but I am wondering as to the value of us voting on a motion to tell Cabinet, go ahead and do exactly what you've already decided you want to do. Additionally, and in support of our democracy and proper governance, we need to have a Freedom of Information Act. As I've pointed out, the way things operate now, persons are too easily able to trot out just the information they want you to have. Whereas if you have a Freedom of Information Act, where individuals can decide that, you know what, I have an interest in a particular area of government, can request information at large, can review that information as a whole, and make informed decisions, make informed comments, make informed interventions based on proper, uncensored information. It is not by accident that every mature democracy, all the established democracies that we look to as examples, have Freedom of Information Acts. And in fact, even in our region, there are countries that have Freedom of Information Acts, and I suggest that as a matter of priority, we start looking at that. I vow, Madam President, that every opportunity I get, I will remind the members of this house, of this chamber, that this is an outstanding area and something that we need to address if we are really going to be serious about addressing some of the shortcomings in our government. Turning to the report itself, Madam President, as I noted, the report is dated the 28th of October 2021. I'm going to assume that it was submitted to Cabinet fairly shortly after that. So the obvious question then arises, what has happened in the intervening almost 18 months? I don't know, and I haven't gotten a sense from the debate either before the lower house or the presentations here as to exactly what areas of the report have been implemented. I know with great fanfare it was announced towards the end of last year that the site was going to be fenced, that it was going to be closed off, the buildings were going to be clean, the bat droppings and everything were going to be dealt with. But other than that, I'm not sure what has been addressed. And for completeness, Madam President, I think I should go through some of the recommendations that have been made in the report. And the reason for doing so is twofold. Because I believe that when you look at the recommendations, many of them, to be honest, I think are obvious. They are steps that need to be taken. And so therefore the question arises, why have they not been taken? So if we start, Madam President, from objective 2, which was to look at the determination of the optimal approaches for the completion and commissioning of the facility and providing advice on the requirements and associated timelines. That's at page 26 of the report. The recommendations were as follows. A, engage a health planner to collaborate with the St. Jude administration and the Ministry of Health to develop and outline clinical operational policy templates based on acceptable room data sheets, departmental schedules, and functional areas. And again, to me, this is an obvious thing. Although, as the report noted previously, there was a disconnect between the design and development of some of the phases and the operation of St. Jude. He then goes on B, to process to ascertain the most pragmatic and expedient way forward of commissioning. So they encourage the creation of a transition team to look at the relevant drawings, the critical clinical operations, budgetary constraints, time constraints, procurement schedules. To me, again, if we are serious about moving St. Jude from the George Odlum Stadium to the St. Jude site, whichever phase you're going to, these things have to be done. Where are they? What stage are we at? Have they been operationalized in any way? Approve an interim budget to facilitate the award of small contracts. I believe maybe this part has been done to clean up, sanitize, prepare, and seal off the building. D, instruct the main contractor to complete the installation of external cladding and seal off the roof parapet, wall detail, and close off the new dialysis and physiotherapy buildings situate in upper platform of phase 2. Again, this is a necessity. I think the Prime Minister noted during his presentation on this report that they had to take urgent steps to finish the building because a building that is not closed is more liable to deteriorate. And since you already have the old phase 1 buildings that were abandoned for almost 6 years, the last thing you want now is the additional new phase, because we can't avoid the physiotherapy and dialysis buildings being used. From my understanding of this report and from visiting the site, they have to be incorporated. Whichever phase you use, they have to be incorporated. So they have to be completed. In the same vein, I would have questioned the previous government as to why the laundry, the West Wing, and all the adjacent buildings were not completed because the new phase 2 could not operate without them. So, I mean, I just become more despondent, to be honest, when I think about the situation we're in, and I read the report, and I apply just some little logic and common sense to things. There seems to be a lot more, and I'll go no further, in the decisions that were taken than the genuine interest of the people of St. Lucia. Because knowing full well that you needed to complete the majority of the buildings, there is no excuse, no explanation for why that was not done. I can understand the desire to do additional things, but let's finish what was done first and then move on. We have a habit sometimes, we're schizophrenic. We want to do several things at the same time, but never finish what we need to do. Moving on to objective 3, which was then look at what the steps that were involved in the determination of feasibility and requirements for the earliest possible transfer of the hospital operations from the George Odlum Stadium. And I guess involved in that was making a determination of which of the phases was best to use. I note that the committee goes on to note that phase 1 of the review, that the buildings in phase 1 generally were more than 75% complete, and that therefore not a lot more work was required to get them to practical completion. And I just, again, when I raised the issue of 75% complete, I couldn't help but note the comments made by the leader of opposition business when he was reading from page 15, 7.4, the status of the report, whereas he was pulled up by the government senators. Again, for me, it's an example of cherry-picking the information to best suit your narrative. And if I read the section, I'll read it in whole, because I think it's important to read it in whole. It starts off by saying the status report dated 29th July 2021, and this is in relation to phase 2, did not indicate the current state of completion of phase 2. However, the review committee estimates that whereas the structure and external envelope of the 3 buildings, the West Wing and dialysis and physiotherapy, remain between 70 and 90% complete. So we're just looking at the external envelope, that's the cladding, and the structure of the building. We're not talking about any of the services, any of the furniture, any of the internal finishings. So just the structure alone was not complete. So it led them to a conclusion that the project as a whole remains less than 30% complete. The committee disagrees with the assessment presented in the status report that the phase 2 is now in an advanced stage of completion. And as I read this again, the statements made by Senator Shallery that they were trying to quench people rings true. And sadly, though, it applies to both sides in my humble opinion. So the recommendations based on what was needed to move most quickly into the St. Jude site is at 10.3.3, page 30 of the report. It goes on to say, given the dire situation that currently exists at the George Odlum National Stadium, the matter of completion and commission of St. Jude should be treated as an emergency and should commence without delay to complete and operational the entire phase 1 and to facilitate its occupation and transition to the George Odlum National Stadium. Now, when I say entire phase 1, I want to caution as well that it means using the physiotherapy and dialysis rooms, buildings, that form part of phase 2. And it goes on to point out that what needs to be done is the establishment of a project steering committee. I think I heard the Prime Minister say that that has been done, but again, I hope for confirmation from the leader of government business. Appoint a project design and management consulting team. Establish user groups. Formulate a transition plan, which they've repeated from before. Recycle as much of the existing phase 1 works as possible. Formulate an action plan to inform the bid process. Where possible, engage service consultants and subcontractors and suppliers who possess local knowledge and experience. Formulate a plan for completing all outstanding works. And then it goes on, most interestingly, to set out actual timelines for when these things should be done. So the question again, I can't escape it, it arises, where are we with these things? Because if we haven't started, it means it's going to take another 18 months just to get to the point of works and transition. A minimum, I should say, of 18 months of works and transition. And I don't understand, and I haven't got an explanation for why there's been that delay. On top of that, I noticed that the report also raises certain questions that are as regards certain equipment and certain things that I've heard nothing about. For example, 8.9 at page 19 mentions that during the construction of phase 2, there was significant damage to the infrastructure of phase 1. The report doesn't detail what that infrastructural damage was, but I would think that this is something that would need to be investigated because we don't know how it's going to impact on the ability to deliver phase 1 and the move and the transition from the George Odlum Stadium to the St. Jude site. But I've heard nothing about that. Similarly, on page 21, at section 8.14, the report states that up to the time at August 2016, when the works were suspended, all kitchen and laundry equipment was ordered and imported, held in storage, in preparation for installation and commissioning in October of 2017. The committee has also ascertained from the documentation received that the value of the kitchen and laundry contracts was $3.34 million. The documents also confirm that the supplier had handed over all the equipment. What has happened to that equipment? Again, bearing in mind that whatever phase we decide to go with, whether it be phase 1, phase 2, the laundry and the kitchen have to be used. As far as this report says, those buildings were 75% complete. In other words, they were very close in terms of completion to facilitate the installation of this equipment. Why was that work stopped? Why was that equipment not installed? And where is that equipment? Perhaps more damningly, it then goes on to 8.15 to note that new equipment was being ordered to be installed in those same buildings at a cost of $3.8 million. Why are we duplicating expenses? Is this the way in which we are using taxpayers' money? That we just take it and we just spend it on something for whatever reason we want it again, we just throw it away and start again? I mean, like I said, the more I speak and the more I listen, the more despondent and almost hopeless I get. Because it seems like there's just been a callous, complete and utter disregard for the well-being of St. Lucians as a whole, for the money of taxpayers, for the monies from lenders and the grants that we receive. How does this, and this is something that I don't think we've given any thought to, how does this and the way in which we have managed these funds bearing in mind that a lot of these funds are either loan or grant funds or taxpayer funds. How does the manner in which we have administered this project affect the willingness of donors and lenders to advance funds to us? When a lender looks and sees that you have already borrowed in excess of $100 million on a project, that 13 years later, well, let's say 2016, if you look at it, in fact, we are no further than we were in 2016. Even if you take into consideration the new phase 2 construction, it is further back than phase 1. So we've advanced nowhere in the last 8 years, almost. This cannot be how we govern a country. This cannot be how we deal with our affairs. We need to get more serious. We need to make the changes necessary to ensure that this does not happen again. In closing, Madam President, I wish to join my colleagues in extending heartfelt appreciation for the staff of St. Jude's, both the medical staff, the administrative staff, and the board of St. Jude's, board and management of St. Jude's, for exhibiting the highest ideals of the medical profession, for continuing to labor and operate in what everybody recognizing is below par, below standard facilities. Let us put an end to their suffering and do what needs to be done to bring this saga to a close. And most importantly, let us learn from it to ensure that we do not go down this same problem again. This may be a little too late, as I said, in relation to the HIA project. But there are other projects that I'm sure government is going to get involved and engaged in. Let us ensure that we do not repeat the errors of our ways. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Stanislas.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And permit me, Madam President, to extend New Year's wishes to you, to senatorial colleagues, and of course to the wonderful people of Soufrière from St. Jacques and St. Lucia in general. Madam President, through you again, I would like to extend condolences to Senator Alison Amja on the passing of her dad. For my thoughts and prayers are with her at this difficult time. I would also like to extend condolences to the Gangadin and Germain families of Soufrière, who yesterday buried Mr. Michael Gangadin and tomorrow will be burying Mr. Archer Germain. I also would like to extend condolences to the Joseph family of Sulphur Springs, who are mourning the death of their father, Mr. Aglan, who happened to be the very last blacksmith in Soufrière. So my sincere condolences to all the bereaved families, Madam President. Madam President, St. Jude's Hospital, I would say, is a hot button issue. It's been a hot button issue for a very long time. It's a very sensitive, very delicate issue, the St. Jude's matter. And we know of the dreadful fire of 2009, the outcome of it, and what had to be done immediately to transfer persons from the burning site, the burning hospital, to the Judge Odlum Stadium, Madam President. Madam President, St. Jude's Hospital impacts every one of us in St. Lucia, but particularly every one of us in the south of the island. It's a very, very critical facility, critical piece of medical infrastructure which we all depend on, which we all rely on, and it definitely needs the attention so that we can have and enjoy another St. Jude's Hospital in the south. We all have had relatives Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, we all have had relatives, we've had friends, loved ones, neighbors who have been admitted at St. Jude's or who have been to St. Jude's to seek some form of medical procedure or medical service at the institution. And it is a fact that this reconstruction of St. Jude's have spanned 4 administrations. Stephenson King administration, the Dr. Kenny Anthony administration, the Alan Shastney administration, and now the Philip J. Pierre administration. Critical, almost 14 years under 4 administration, and we have not had a complete hospital for the South. Mr. Deputy President. Mr. President, Deputy President, this debate today, like my colleague said earlier, and I think other speakers have mentioned, should not be a debate which is characterized with or laden with politics. The issue at hand is bigger than politics. That's right. Much bigger. And I now, Mr. Deputy President, go to the motion which was presented earlier in the morning by the leader of government business. And I would like to look at number 2, the second part of the motion, which says that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendations presented by the review committee to the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the Judge Odlum National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. My issue with this motion, this part of the motion, Mr. Deputy President, is that this, I believe, is a policy decision of government. This is not a legislative decision. The Parliament role involves legislation and monetary and fiscal policies. The Cabinet of Ministers is the executive arm of government. And the executive arm, the Cabinet, have already taken a decision, a policy decision on St. Jude's, that they are going to move to the original site. So I don't think it makes sense to ask Parliament for the advice to do so when you have already taken the decision. I have no issues with the report being laid in Parliament like every other report. That's right. But I believe that motion number 2, seeking advice of Parliament, when Parliament never authorized a report on St. Jude's, doesn't make sense. And it is the prerogative of any government, Mr. Deputy President, to enact any policy decision. But at the end of the day, the opposition have the right to question those policy decisions. We have the right to question. We have questions and we have the right to ask those questions. But at the end of the day, the decision, the eyes are in the hands of the government. Because if you go to the report, Mr. Deputy President, 3.0, where Cabinet Conclusion number 6 of 2021, dated August 9th, approved the formation of the committee and acts on the feasibility and requirements for an immediate move and transfer of operations from the George Order National Stadium to the original St. Jude site. So the committee was given a clear mandate in the Cabinet Conclusion, clear instruction that we want to move to the original site. There is nothing in this Cabinet Conclusion that says to also consider remaining at the phase 2 site. It's clear. It's clear that the committee, the Cabinet Conclusion, directed them to do the feasibility on relocating to the original site. That's clear.
What section?
That is clear. Okay?
What section?
3.0, the Cabinet Conclusion. It is also important to note, Mr. Deputy President, that the report, the St. Jude's report, was submitted on October 28th, 2021. And we're in January 2023. That was 15 months ago. 15 months ago, a report was submitted to Cabinet. And today you are coming to ask us to advise the Cabinet on accepting the report. It's important to know that. The reality, Mr. Deputy President, whether it is this report, whether it is all the other reports prior to this report today, we still do not have a St. Jude's Hospital. That's the reality. That is the reality. And the project has spanned 4 administrations. So people should not come in here and just lay blame, excuses. And that goes for both sides. Both sides, Mr. Deputy President. Both sides. We do not have a St. Jude's. And we need to get this project done. It's long overdue. It is long overdue, Mr. Deputy President. The people of the South deserve the hospital, and we must do everything to ensure that St. Jude's Hospital is completed. How we go about completing it, how we go about achieving this, both parties have ideas. Both parties will tell you it is that we go right, one will tell you go left. But at the end of the day, the hospital is long overdue. It has spanned 4 administrations, and the people of St. Lucia are frustrated, they're angry, and they want to see this project completed. Mr. Deputy President, because it is seriously impacting the health, the well-being of many of our people in the South. And not only do we have to concentrate on completing St. Jude's, but we need to do something very drastic with the healthcare system in the country. It's been plaguing the country for decades, for many years. It needs urgent attention, Mr. Deputy President. And you hear stories from people all over the country regarding the state of affairs, not only at St. Jude's, at George Order Stadium, but all the health facilities on the island, at OKEU, at VH, which is the respiratory hospital right now, all over the place. healthcare is a problem, it's an issue, it's in a crisis mode on the island. You have stories of expats who have been living here for quite some time, but because of the state of affairs of health care on the island, they've had to go back to the UK, to Canada, to the US. You have the complaints from our people here. I think early on somebody said persons were on a stretcher in the hallway. And it is a recurring problem every week, every month, every year. But we are not here to blame. We need to find the solutions, Mr. Deputy President. And the same way we need to find the solutions to fix the healthcare system, we need to solve that problem of construction of the St. Jude's Hospital. Mr. Deputy President, to improve the standard of operation and management of the St. Jude Hospital, that the former cabinet that I was part of took the hard decision to construct a modern building to revitalize and regenerate health services in the South. This decision, Mr. Deputy President, was not an easy one. It wasn't easy, but was done with the interest of the country at heart. And when we came in government, we looked at the project, we looked at where it was at, the technical audit was done, the report of the audit was given to cabinet, and based on all the issues, the technical, the structural issues, the amount of money that was already spent, the problems with the water, electrical, gas lines, the structural integrity. Because St. Jude's was built in 1966. The layout of the rooms, the flooring, the height of floor to ceiling, all of that. The cabinet made the decision that we are going to move forward with the new St. Jude site, which the members on the government side call the monstrosity, call the box. When it is convenient, they call it the building. When it's convenient, they call it phase 2. And we moved in this direction into phase 2, Mr. Deputy President, based on the vision that we had and we still have for the south of the island. We had a long-term plan, vision plan for the south. That entails, Mr. Deputy President, the rehabilitation expansion of HIA. We had the cruise terminal, the additional hotel rooms to come in the south, the ICT jobs that was being created there, the economic opportunities that would have been created in the south that would further increase the population of the south. We felt that we needed to build a world-class, state-of-the-art health facility to facilitate the development of the South. And therefore, we went into this direction. Mr. Deputy President, today, the government of the day have decided they do not want to go in this direction, but they want to go in another direction to the old site. It is their prerogative. But we're asking very pertinent questions. Very pertinent questions. Have the government done a costing of going back to the original site, knowing of all the issues, all the technical, all the structural issues that this building they were faced with? at the original site? Do we know an exact costing? Do we know how long it is going to take? These are important questions. Do we know how long it is going to take to remedy all those technical issues and complete that hospital? Is it going, when it is completed, if it is completed, is it going to be functional? Is it going to be able to get accredited? These are important questions. This is not politics, but these are important questions. Vis-a-vis the new building, the phase 2 building, where in the report, which was read by Senator Lee, my colleague senator, which says that the building 70 to 90% complete overall. The ground floor, which is to house the 90-bed facility, and 30% complete total. The report also says that to complete the ground floor, the Department of Economic Development said it would take $48 million. So, have the government given thought to that additional $48 million to how much it will cost to get the old site functional again? These are the important questions, Mr. President. These are important questions. But this project is critical for the South. It is long overdue. 4 administrations have gone back and forth. It has not been delivered. It is my fervent hope, Mr. Deputy President, that the government will rethink the decision to go back to the original site, look at all the cost implications, all what I've said, the length of time if they really want to deliver a hospital in the shortest period of time to the people of St. Lucia. If the hospital stands a very good chance of getting accredited, if they focus on the development of the South to create more economic opportunities for people in the South, just rethink. But at the end of the day, the government has the authority, they have the eyes, they can move in any direction which they wish to. But the opposition is asking those critical questions so that we do not find ourselves bogged down with an incomplete St. Jude's Hospital in another 5-6 years again, Mr. Deputy President. With these few words, Mr. Deputy President, I thank you very much, and I hope that the leader of government business will consider my comments, my recommendations on the way forward for the completion of St. Jude's Hospital. I thank you.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Deputy President, I move for the suspension of the Senate for an hour, please. For 1 hour until 3 p.m.
Senators, the question is that the sitting of the Senate be suspended for an hour for lunch. Well, it's until 3 o'clock? Until 3 o'clock. I now put the question. As many of that opinion say aye. As many of a contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
just heard, the first sitting of the Senate for the year 2023 to discuss the motion that Parliament acknowledge receipt of the report of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project and express or that the Parliament advised the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendations presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. We heard from most of the senators this morning. The only one who is yet to address this upper house is the new senator who is standing in for the senator in the person of Senator Jean, whose father passed away and she's unable to be here, so standing in for her this afternoon or today is Senator Silas Wilson. Well, he is yet to address the Parliament, so when we return at approximately 3 o'clock, we will hear from Silas Wilson, who will be making his maiden address to this Parliament in the current debate on the St. Jude Hospital Review Committee on the reconstruction of the St. Jude Hospital. With me is Michael Gaspar.
Merci Winston. Et puis quand Winston finit d'eau, nous venons au bout de première session, session Sénat là aujourd'hui avec bon matin. Ça qui était intéressant, c'est que ça c'est sénateur Alison Jean. Moi quoi, c'est pas moi quoi, c'est papa est mort. L'autre pays avec était pour attendre l'étément. Avec pour replacer nous sénateur Silas Wilson qui enfin pour en cas si jeudi pour replacer toutes les autres membres parlement ça c'est sénateur à ce façade du gouvernement il est présent avec aussi l'année des sénateurs ça c'est sénateur Harold Stanislas et puis sénateur Fédé qui tous les déjà parlé avec aussi l'union sénateur qui est indépendant qui présent l'autre là par de ça fait aujourd'hui et qui apparaît comme quoi l'année dit l'autre membre sénateur qui a présenté là nous dévier après-midi ça c'est sénateur Silas Wilson et puis sénateur madame Antoine ça c'est Pauline Antoine qui sa secrétaire parlement ministre indication et qui a fait présentation et puis après ça nous avons ça c'est chef façade gouvernement qui a fini en motion aujourd'hui et aussi l'autre bill à ce gouvernement ça c'est comme côté gouvernement qui a essayé joindre et puis enfin ranger et bien venir même en organisation Afrique pour faire business avec Baïkongosan. Ça pas sinon manière était passé mardi il pas point de parole et bien débat sur ça mais c'est ça qui a fini ici là nous dévier à 3h après-midi nous mais dévier maintenant virer en studio nous NTN